Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku got Quirk from All for One, and Deku becomes a fearless villain, part 1. So before we start, please go check out the author of this fanfic, MentalMind, link is in the description. Also subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's begin the video. Rapid gunfire erupts from the barrels of two modified weapons. The firearms belong to the pro hero known as Snipe, who despite having amazing technique with the specialized guns, struggles in a fierce battle with the hero killer only known as Stain. Stain uses great agility to leap wall from wall within the confined alley in which the fight ensues, whilst dodging what little gunshots he can by maneuvering in such a pattern. Stain uses one of many blades in his weapon's arsenal to deflect bullets that nearly make their mark. Snipe jumps back to put some distance between himself and the hero killer. With what minimal time he has before Stain is upon him, the pro hero uses it to reload shells into his weapons. Stain doesn't take the chance though, but rather takes cover behind a dumpster for bullets to ricochet off the improvised shield. Stain peeks around the corner of the dumpster so he can examine his target more thoroughly. The gun-toting hero's resemblance is that of a typical Western cowboy, the only true difference being a tan gas mask to cover his face and the dreadlocks snaking out from under his hat. Likewise, Snipe had been sure not to underestimate such a legendary figure as the hero killer. He had been sure to analyze his opponent long before the two engaged in combat. Stain surely lived up to the rumors. The intimidation from his appearance alone was enough to shake Snipe to the core. The hero killer glares from his corner cover, the rage-filled eyes barely visible through his messy black hair. It would completely drape over his face if not for the tattered cloth worn as a mask. Similar to Snipe's holsters and padding, the pro hero had noticed Stain's plated armor and pockets. They allowed storage for multiple knives and daggers that were bound to be used in this intense situation. With a brief stare down past, the two continue their fight. Stain leaps over the dumpster he was using as a shield and draws a worn and partially damaged katana from the sheath on his back. The deflection of bullets is continued with the extra blade. Snipe is taken back by being rushed on. Nobody had ever run directly into his gunfire before. The momentary shock is shaken off in an instant. Hesitations could cost him his life. With his head back in the game, Snipe redirects his footing and line of fire to dodge Stain's head-on attack. Yet again, Snipe needed a small window of time to reload his guns. To allow for such an occasion, the pro hero resorts to using another tool he carries. The gunslinger tosses a smoke grenade into the gap between him and the hero killer. An explosion of smoke conceals Snipe's whereabouts and movements as he reloads his weapons. However, this desperate move also comes at a disadvantage with the likes of someone such as Stain. This tactic could also be used to flush enemies out of or into an area, depending on how intelligent or experienced the opponent. A display of Stain's intellect is crystal clear once Snipe looks above the fog. The hero killer had avoided the smoke entirely. He used spare folding knives to scale the alley. Now with the higher ground, Stain had the greater advantage. It was now a match of who was faster than the other. Stain thrusted out several throwing knives and Snipe went trigger-happy on his guns. The two opponents weaved away from one another's attacks, but Snipe didn't manage to evade one of the stray blades. It slices through his shoulder, leaving a scar that burns with pain. Despite it not being an extremely deep cut, the wound does serve its purpose. Snipe was unaware of what his enemy's quirk actually is, so he didn't think to prevent Stain from getting his hands on the bloody dagger. With a sinister grin, Stain wraps his lengthy tongue around the blade to lick it clean. The blood that was once stained on the knife, now a tasty treat for the hero killer. Snipe was disturbed by the freakish display, but didn't think twice of it, as he took aim on the hero killer. Before he could pull the trigger though, he felt his body become paralyzed. That's when the pro hero finally realized what happened. So that's the hero killer's quirk. He can cause his opponent to freeze up just by ingesting samples of their blood, Snipe thought to himself. Now that he had finally detained his target, Stain lowered his guard with a beaming smile. All Snipe could do now was watch, as the hero killer approached him with a distinct hunch. The pro hero surely believed now that he was going to be Stain's next victim. Stain raised his katana above Snipe's head, prepared to finish what he had started. The only thing that causes him to hesitate is the sudden presence of someone else. A figure shrouded in the night's darkness gives Stain an applause for defeating the pro hero Snipe. Well done. It took you longer than I would have hoped for, but you achieved victory in the end. And that's all that really matters, right? The remark comes from an unknown figure. Stain narrows his eyes to try and make out who the man could be. The darkness makes it very difficult to make out any features. Just to be cautionary, Stain points his blade at the mystery person as a warning. This doesn't concern you. Leave us. Stain orders the onlooker to go away and hopes that they'll obey. Despite what the media says, he isn't just some ruthless murderer. Stain would much rather prevent the death of innocents, and truly only wants the fake heroes dead. The ones considered pros only seek money or fame, and it disgusts him. Ever since Stain vowed to purge the world of these false prophets. I think we'll both find that it does. My apologies if you feel threatened. I only mean to talk, the figure speaks, as he enters the alleyway. Now no longer shrouded in shadows, the moonlight beams on the mystery man to reveal his features. The person Stain had formerly thought to be an onlooker of some sort, perhaps a citizen, is no longer in the question. This man wears a costume, which means he must either be a hero or a villain. The suit is a fine line between intimidating and showmanship, a dark green color mixed with black to allow for blending in with the night or standing out during the day. A dark red belt matches the same red within Stain's outfit. This puts the hero killer off easy. There's no telling what could be concealed in the utility belt. Guns like Snipe, blades like Stain, or something else? What really serves as horrifying thought is the mask that this man wears. It seems to be shaped into a metallic sinister frown. Some may say that it's the opposite of All Might's symbolic smile. Like the symbol of peace does with his toothy grin. To instill hope, this certainly does the opposite. It instills fear and doom. I don't feel like talking. This is your last chance. Leave us, Stain threatens the menacing man. He wants to put as much distance as he can between himself and this newcomer. The green-suited man makes him uneasy, a feeling Stain hasn't felt in a long time. That's fine. I'll be doing most of the speaking anyway. The green figure replies in a tone that implies his mood matches the frown-shaped mask. Stain fights the instinct to attack the mystery man, for he has no clue if this person is a hero or villain yet, nor does he have an idea of what the man's quirk may be. For now, all Stain can do is listen to what the imposing figure has to say. He can't afford to be impulsive. When there's no reply from Stain, the green figure takes that as a gesture to continue speaking. Like you, I'm fed up with these people who call themselves heroes. A hero is meant to be someone who wants to save people, to make a difference, and receive no thanks or praise in return. These people labeled heroes are nothing near that. They're greedy, narcissistic frauds who are undeserving of the quirks bestowed upon them. I have a plan on how to show the rest of the world this truth, so they can visibly see they were praising the wrong people. However, I can't do it alone. I'm putting together a group of like-minded people, and want you to be a part of it. The mystery man explains what he wants with the hero killer. The green figure holds out his hand for Stain to take whilst moving forward. Join me. The mystery man presents his offer. Stain is in shock. He hadn't met anyone else that shared his ideology, and now this man just spoke exactly the same thoughts that dawned on him so long ago. Before the hero killer can ask or say anything in response, the pro-hero he had been fighting earlier comes to his senses. Snipe had felt the paralysis fade away, now overcome by a strange tingling sensation. Feeling came back to the pro-hero slowly, but surely, as he began to wiggle his fingers. He had heard everything the newcomer said. It was truly concerning, and he had to do something about it while he still could. Snipe planned to use his element of surprise to shoot what was now certain to be another villain. After he caught that one off guard, he'd sweep Stain's feet from under him and proceed to finish the job. However, Stain saw the pro-hero recovering before Snipe's plan could unfold. So, this one is type A, Stain thought to himself. Stain's quirk, Bloodcurdle, has limitations that none have lived to tell. The amount of time a victim is paralyzed varies depending on their blood type. Type B would have the longest duration, with a decreasing order of AB, A, and then O. Regardless, the maximum time anyone could be paralyzed is roughly 8 minutes. Despite seeing Snipe recover from the paralysis, Stain isn't fast enough to stop the pro-hero from firing his gun. The bullet leaves the chamber before Stain can even move, and it's headed straight for the green figure's head. Then, just as fast as the bullet itself, if not faster, the green figure moves their arm and catches the bullet. Stain and Snipe are both in shock to see the mystery man holding the shrapnel in between two of his fingers. After a second of the pro-hero and hero killer gawping, the green-suited man throws the bullet back at Snipe with extreme force that accumulates the same speed the bullet had when leaving the gun's chamber. As intended for the green-suited man, the bullet goes straight through Snipe's skull. Blood leaks out from the bullet hole like a shower head, confirming the pro-hero previously known as Snipe is dead. My offer still stands, the green-suited murderer dryly says before extending the same hand he used to catch the bullet with. Neither Stain or the murderous green figure knew if the hero killer took his hand out of fear or respect that night. All that was certain is that no hero, not even All Might, would defeat such a powerful person. Once the two shook hands, Stain asked the question everyone would be asking upon meeting this man. Who are you? The green-suited murderer removed his mask for similarly green hair to pop out. My name is Izuku Midoriya, but you can call me Deku. Izuku Midoriya couldn't think about what sort of cruelty he would undergo if he got caught. It seemed so long ago that Izuku was just a green-haired boy running from a group of bullies. Back then, young Midoriya's legs had burned from the amount of pressure put into his crazy sprint. The child's legs felt like twigs waiting to be snapped, as they took him, as fast as he could go. The kid clutched a notebook against his chest with the same amount of force he was using to move his feet. However, No matter how much effort Izuku put into running away, the bullies always caught up. The trio of bullies had several useful quirks that allowed them to keep up. One of the boys had wings for crying out loud. The other two relied on other abilities to keep up with young Midoriya, specifically the group leader Katsuki Bakugo. The messy-haired blonde used his explosion quirk to shoot controlled bursts out from the palms of his hands. Every small eruption launched him forward, closer to the green-haired boy. It was out front their school fountain that the students chasing Izuku finally grabbed hold of him. Katsuki took the lead and shoved Midoriya to the ground, laughing along with his cronies. The journal young Midoriya had been holding broke free of the boy's grasp and slid right into Bakugo's foot. This piqued the bully's interest. He immediately picked it up to read what was inside. There was bound to be some good material in it to tease Izuku with. The relationship between young Midoriya and adolescent Bakugo wasn't always this way. The two used to be the best of friends actually, idolizing the same hero named All Might. Like most children, they had always dreamt of the day their quirks developed. The spiky-haired blonde happened to develop rather quickly, and it gained praise from his peers. Since Midoriya hadn't gotten his and Bakugo's status quo had peaked so highly, Katsuki quickly discarded their friendship to maintain his popularity. When he discovered Izuku happened to be quirkless, he took it up a notch and began teasing his old friend. Now Katsuki dubbed the green-haired boy Deku as an insult. It was meant to be a play on words with Izuku's name, meaning blockhead or dummy. While young Midoriya was given a nickname full of mockery, Bakugo had been given an idolized title, Kaken. The two were complete perils of one another. In every way they had been made opposites. One full of power he abused, and the other with none to defend himself. The boy now called Kaken flipped open the notebook to a random page, finding one of Izuku's many drawings. The picture Midoriya made on this specific piece of paper was of what he imagined his superhero costume would look like. What stood out to Bakugo was the mask. It had a smile and springy pieces upon the top similar to All Might's signature grin and pointy hair. Despite also idolizing the pro-hero like many others, Kaken decided to make a mockery of it. He used his explosion quirk to burn the drawing with continued laughter. "You want to be like All Might?" the crude boy asked. "How can you do that when you're just a quirkless loser, Deku?" Bakugo taunted. Midoriya couldn't help it anymore. He began crying over the scorched notebook. His journal was everything to him. Years of notes, covering all sorts of heroes with their amazing quirks and strategies. The boy had been studying them all so he could try and make it as one without a quirk. Like usual, his old friend had tainted his dream with negativity. It made the green-haired boy sorrowful to have no one he could turn to while having nothing at all to begin with. "There's no harm in trying, Kaken," Izuku cried back with as much courage as he could muster. Not even his own mother believed he could do it. It was a rare feat for someone to not develop a quirk. However, Izuku played the victim. With all the powerful villains going toe-to-toe with someone as strong as All Might these days, she for sure thought a powerless kid wouldn't stand a chance. She cradled Izuku as the two cried that day, telling him that she was sorry. He had asked her if being quirkless would stop him from being a hero, and all she had to say in response was sorry. Nobody ever encouraged young Midoriya. There was never any support yet. He wouldn't give up, as he always told himself. There was no harm in at least trying. Katsuki scoffed at the statement. "You might as well try jumping off a roof. See if you get a quirk to fly," the boy snickered. This gained a chorus of chuckling from the other bullies, ending with a high five. "There's no harm in trying." Kaken threw Izuku's words back in his face. Poor Midoriya couldn't bring himself to reply. All he could do was curl up against the fountain and cry. After the boys saw that Izuku would no longer give them any amusement, they started to leave. Even as they walked away, the rude remarks stuck into Izuku like thorns. They muttered things like crybaby or that curse of a nickname Deku. The words seemed to echo over and over again in the back of Midoriya's mind, never ceasing his tears. With a shaky hand, Midoriya reached out to take back the charred notebook. Upon his touch, the heat still remained, and made him toss it, as a reflex. Like the world was out to bully him too, the journal fell into the fountain, and became drenched. Izuku quickly fished the book out of the water, and saw that despite its damage, the writings were still visible. His eyes were drawn to the smile on his fan-made costume, and it made him angry. With a vengeful heart, Izuku took out a pencil, and altered the mask. Like his current emotions, he turned the smile into a frown. Instantly, the young boy comes to his senses, and regrets it. He tries using the eraser on the back of his pencil, but it doesn't work against the still damp paper. The scrubbing of the eraser head only makes the frown worse, twisting and contorting it into a more wicked snarl. Izuku's heart thumps with a fearful beat. It's like an inner demon staring back at him. The only thing that draws the boy's eyes away is the sound of a man's voice asking, "Why didn't you use your quirk?" Izuku turns around, searching for the source of the vocalization. The green-haired boy is both confused and worried to find that he can't seem to spot anyone else within the area. The thought crossed his mind that he was possibly going crazy and hearing voices in his head. Why didn't you use your quirk? The question hits him again with a more stern tone this time, as if it were ordering him to respond rather than asking. Along with the voice, the person it belongs to steps out of the shade from under a tree. The man wears a wrinkled business suit without the tie, and some sort of device upon his head. It frightens Izuku. The skull-like mask had angular pipes shooting out the top, and a collar-like life support system around his neck. If that weren't terrifying enough, the man appeared to have no facial features. The head looked, although it was made entirely out of scar tissue, bound together by nothing but the contraption he wore. What do you mean? Izuku barely manages to stutter out in a trembly response. The young boy wants to run, but finds himself feeling paralyzed. You could have fought back or perhaps moved a little faster. Go on, show me your quirk, the older man suggested while being none the wiser to Izuku's rare condition. I can't, I'm quirkless, Midoriya shouts, as his reply. It's more of a desperate woeful cry than an angry yell. I see, the well-dressed adult says back with intrigue strewed in his tone. Midoriya's blood runs cold when the masked man chuckles. The mysterious newcomer approaches Izuku with an offer. What would you say if I could give you one? Young Midoriya always thought things over first. His mind worked like gears in a mechanism. His brain never stayed unoccupied, something always flowing through it. However, upon hearing that simple sentence, his mind goes blank. It's like he can't conceive of the possibility being real. Like a computer rebooting itself, Midoriya returns to his senses. Despite wanting nothing more than a powerful quirk to become a pro-hero like his idol All Might, he couldn't accept the gift. Not only was it far too sketchy, but he had become focused on proving he could do this without a quirk. I'd say thank you, sir, but no thank you. I plan on becoming a hero regardless. It's my dream to save people with a smile. If I can do that without a quirk, it'll only show everyone how far I've come, Izuku replies. His cheerfulness returns. His passion always motivates that kind of attitude. Despite the man having no facial features, it was apparent that he was disappointed with Midoriya's response. Very well, he mutters. An awkward moment of silence passes before he says anything else, making Izuku feel uncomfortable again. If you change your mind, here's my card, the mysterious masked man says while handing Izuku a calling card. The green-haired boy gives it a quick glance, skimming the text typed across it that gave only an address. Thanks, Midoriya nervously choked out. You're always welcome. Believe me when I say I'll see you again soon. Eventually you'll come to me, the well-dressed adult replies, as he steps back into the tree's shade in which he came. Izuku is shocked to see the man vanish once the shadow drapes over. It takes a while, but Midoriya shakes off the creepy encounter and starts walking home. The boy notices the sun going down and decides to take a shortcut under a small bridge. He normally avoids it due to the low population, and it could be dangerous. But what are the chances of someone mugging him around the school? Apparently very high. A creature made of what looks like green sludge wraps itself around young Midoriya, the sticky texture keeping Izuku from escaping its grasp. The young boy barely makes out the start of a scream before his mouth is covered with goop. As Izuku continued to struggle against the being's hold, he began to realize he couldn't catch a breath of air. He was being suffocated. His vision started to swim. As oxygen became slim, the boy for sure thought he was a goner. A bright light even started to grow towards him, the rumored sign that one gets when dying. While this glowing wasn't heaven, it was a savior. Izuku never imagined he'd get to see All Might in person, and yet the pro-hero was right there in front of him. The shining green-haired boy saw through blurry sight glimmered off of the hero's fist just before it connected with the sludge villain. Smash! All Might boomed with a deep and powerful voice. Like a water balloon getting thrown against a wall, the sludge monster explodes on impact. Izuku drew in the biggest breath he ever did. As soon as air became available to him, he felt greedy with all the inhaling he was doing, trying to absorb as much of the oxygen as he could. The gasps only became more frequent with the awe of being snatched up by All Might and taken away from the battle. Wait here, young man, All Might ordered before leaping back into action. Izuku couldn't say anything back since he was too busy gawping at his hero. All Might, the sludge villain gurgled with hate as it tried morphing itself back together. Before it could do so though, the pro-hero hit him with another powerful impact. While the evildoer was vulnerable, All Might took the opportunity to scoop up its remains into a glass jar. With his hand being used as a cover, All Might calls out to Izuku. Hey kid, have you got anything to use as a lid? The hero asks. Oh my god, holy crap, my god, All Might is really talking to me. What do I say? Why can't I say anything? Izuku's inner thoughts shouted, as he stared back at All Might with amazement. Not much of a talker, eh? No matter, I've got to be going anyway. Remember kid, plus ultra, All Might says with a thumbs up using his free hand. Izuku begins to panic, as All Might crouches down, preparing to soar into the sky. He had so many things he wanted to ask All Might if the two had ever met, and now that he finally had, he was going to miss his opportunity. In a desperate attempt to stop his hero from leaving, Izuku ran at the muscular man and grabbed hold of his leg. Wait, Izuku finally managed to say something. However, it was too late, as All Might kicked off from the ground. The young boy and pro-hero took flight, soaring higher and higher into the sky. Izuku screamed as they flew over the top of skyscrapers. It was all the commotion that the child was making that made All Might finally notice he had a stowaway. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? Let go!" All Might shouted whilst trying to shake Midoriya's grip off his leg. "Wait, I can't fly!" Izuku cried, as his fingers slipped free and he began plummeting downwards. Realizing his mistake, All Might immediately dove after the child and caught Izuku. "Have no fear, for I am here." All Might winked. Midoriya wanted to kiss the ground beneath him once the two landed upon a nearby rooftop. His relief must have shown because All Might didn't hold off on scolding the boy for such a stunt. "What on earth were you thinking?" the pro-hero questioned. "I'm sorry," young Midoriya apologized. He bowed to show respect while saying, "My name is Izuku Midoriya. I'm your biggest fan." All Might had to keep from rolling his eyes. There's no telling how many times he's heard that before. "So you just decided to hitch a ride?" the hero asked. "No, I wanted to ask you something," Izuku cried out. He had so many questions, but he'd settle for just one. "I don't have time to give you an autograph, sorry," All Might said hurriedly, as he rushed towards the rooftop ledge. "Do you think someone could be a hero without a quirk?" Izuku Midoriya shouted after All Might before the hero could fly off again. He yelled it so loud that the whole city probably heard him, but he didn't care because it caught All Might's attention. The pro-hero lingered there for a moment, as if he was trying to make the hardest decision of his life. To Izuku, it seemed like All Might was trying to choose his answer to the question he presented, whilst in reality, the hero had a secret: his power could only last for so long. He couldn't stay there any longer without resorting to a weaker form and risking exposure. All Might wanted to tell him that he too had been quirkless, that he'd been given this amazing power through a quirk called One for All. However, that too was a secret. Besides, the pro-hero didn't know this boy if he had what it took to become the next barber of such immense power. So he decided to tell the child what he probably didn't want to hear, that someone couldn't become a hero without a quirk. They'd most likely die in combat against more powerful threats. There wasn't time to explain it that way though, so All Might answered in a one-worded response. "No," the pro-hero said before soaring into the sky. Izuku felt his heart shatter like a glass cup getting dropped on the floor. His body became numb like his senses. His emotions were drastic and undefinable, as his world came crumbling down around him. They say you shouldn't meet your heroes. They're right. All the faith and all the hope that young Midoriya had was put into All Might. Now that is all gone. Right about now, Izuku would be shedding tears and curl up into the worthless ball that Kaken said he was. This time, the green-haired boy had no tears. Izuku dug his fingers into the pocket of his pants, thumbing the business card he had taken from the shady man back at the fountain. All Might had just confirmed it was impossible to become a hero without a quirk. The guy that Izuku met back at his school offered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Maybe it was too good to be true, but it didn't hurt to try, did it? Midoriya found himself entering a back alley, regretting the decision to come to such a place. Just as he was about to run the other way, the metal door in between him and fate opened. On the other side of it was the familiar odd-looking man Midoriya had met by the fountain. "I knew that you'd come. Please come in," the man says happily while gesturing for Izuku to enter the building. Midoriya hesitates before cautiously moving forward. Once he's inside the facility, the masked man closes the door behind them. The interior isn't as shady as the outside, not by a long shot. Inside the quaint space are various pieces of furniture that look brand new. "Right this way," the man says while leading Izuku down a corridor. At the end of the hallway, there's a catwalk that overlooks various water tanks. From the view that they have, it's difficult to make out what's inside, but Izuku trembles at the thought of it being people. "Now you see that I have quite the little operation set up here. You understand that what I said back at your school was no misconception. I'm the real deal. I have a lot to offer you, young man," the masked figure states. Izuku fights the urge to run away, as the imposing person crouches down to the same level. "I never got your name," the masked man says. "And Midoriya, I mean Izuku." "Izuku Midoriya, sir," the green-haired boy stutters. It's obvious to tell that he's frightened. "Didn't those other children call you Deku?" the figure questions. He wants to keep the scare tactic going, especially since he thinks Izuku is lying about his name. The kid was obviously scared. That may mean he was filled with regret. The masked man didn't want the boy to go crying for help. He couldn't put up with too much attention. "That's the name they made up to tease me," Izuku explained. The masked man recomposed himself, now understanding that Deku was just a nickname, and not the boy's actual alias. "I see. So it's like an insult then?" the figure asks while standing back up. "Yeah," the reply is written with embarrassment. Izuku couldn't bear to look at the man before due to his appearance, but now it has to do with shame. "People call me all for one. That's meant to be an insult too, as if to say I'm selfish." "You don't think I'm selfish, do you? I'm going to grant you a quirk after all." The masked man answers his own question for Midoriya. "Thank you, sir," If you really do give me a quirk, I'll really appreciate it, Midoriya says through hopeful tears. Don't cry, child. It doesn't suit you. If you want to be as powerful as you say, you'll need to show that you're deserving of it. The man now known as All for One wipes the tears gently off Izuku's cheeks. How can I deserve this power? Midoriya asked the man, as if he were his father. Somehow, the green-haired boy knew what he would receive could match such a quirk as All Might's. Now, Izuku felt that the pro-hero was undeserving, and if the symbol of peace didn't deserve his quirk, how could someone such as Izuku Midoriya turn what they gave you into something they'll dread? I want you to be like me, as a child, owing to the name Deku, as I did with All for One, the masked man tells Izuku, as if the boy had just sold his soul. All for One places his hand on Midoriya's shoulder, but not reassuringly. A painful spike shoots into the spot under the man's palm, making Midoriya want to cry out in agonizing torment. The sound doesn't escape the green-haired boy's mouth, as a hum of energy surges through instead. Izuku felt as if he had just been blown up from the inside, his pulse growing rapidly. Then, as fast as this terrible feeling overcame him, it vanished. And by all for one, I mean all for you, Deku, the masked man says while removing his hand from the boy's shoulder. Izuku Midoriya was quirkless no more. Young Midoriya felt certain that his body wouldn't be capable of sustaining such a vigorous routine. After he had been granted a quirk, his insides felt although they were an overflowing cup. To make sure such immense power wouldn't implode Izuku, the man he now called All for One agreed to coach the green-haired boy. Day after day, extreme training resulted in the child passing out from exhaustion. His workout regimen often left Midoriya dehydrated and starved, a downside to the quirk bestowed upon him. Throughout his preparations, Izuku had worked with another boy named Tamura Shigaraki. His newly formed ally had iconic blue hair that dropped over the boy's eyes. The other disciple of All for One had been granted the quirk of decay, resulting in anything to deteriorate by a simple touch of Tamura's hand. The two boys in training had occasionally sparred with one another. All for One tasked Tamura with trying to get Izuku in his grasp while Midoriya only had to evade. While that allowed for Izuku to have a great defense, his offense had much more immense input. The amount of force that Midoriya could release into just a tap of his finger could destroy an entire building. All for One wanted to push the boy, drive him to release more power into uncontrolled punches. But Izuku had decided to try and contain his power so it wouldn't accidentally kill someone. The amount of effort was excruciating, but in time it had paid off. The pristine hero school Udate was holding its next entrance exam in just a few more days. Izuku hadn't told All for One that he intended on trying out with the other attendees yet. He wanted it to be a surprise. Despite everybody putting him down, saying that he couldn't become a hero without a quirk, All for One showed faith in Izuku. The man granted the boy with a quirk, as powerful as All Might, and helped channel that power into the man Midoriya would soon become. Izuku had a goofy grin on his face, as he thought about overachieving Kaken. He would become a hero greater than even the likes of All Might. The smile confused his sparring partner, causing Tamura to stall in his attack. The brief window of time was everything Izuku needed to overpower Tamura and pin his opponent. The two boys turned their attention to the applause of an onlooker. It was All for One clapping as he approached his disciples. Well done, Izuku, the teacher proudly praised Midoriya. His tone turned into one of anger and disappointment as he addressed Shigaraki. Tamura, return to your quarters, All for One growled with a scolding voice. The blue-haired boy flinched like he had just been hit upon hearing the sentence from his master. Yes sir, Tamura croaked out before leaving although he had a tail tucked between his legs. Tamura clenched his fists in envy. The quick glare he gave Izuku was one of pure hatred. Before young Midoriya had arrived, All for One channeled his attention into the blue-haired boy. Now Tamura was stricken with jealousy, as his master focused on Izuku instead. What a disappointment, that boy, All for One said under his breath to nobody in particular. However, Izuku happened to hear the words. Tamura almost had me that time. Midoriya lied so his sparring partner could be given the same approval he had received. Izuku felt bad for the boy he had been training with. Tamura had worked just as hard. Despite all the time they spent together, none of it was used to become friends and get to know one another. They had just strictly trained day in and day out. If All for One had any eyebrows, one of them would have surely been raised. Having witnessed the entire match, it was clear that Tamura had hesitated during their fight and Midoriya took advantage of the weakness. However, Izuku was different from Shigaraki. He didn't find motivation through that sort of encouragement. The one thing All for One hadn't achieved to change yet about Midoriya was his good heart. The green-haired boy was willing to see his peer as an equal, and didn't want it any other way. All for One grinned under his life support mask. This worked in his favor since Tamura was his original plan anyways. Perhaps now, Midoriya could make the boy learn from his flaws and become much more powerful. The two would form the perfect duo to defeat All Might. He still has much to learn. Unlike you, you've come a long way. Perhaps you could show Tamura a thing or two, All for One suggested. Izuku perked up at the thought of getting to teach Shigaraki. This would allow for the two to finally form some sort of relationship other than just being sparring partners. Yeah, I'd be happy to, Midoriya replied happily. All for One caught on to the cheerful attitude. He knew that Izuku was looking to make a friend, and intended to make sure that didn't happen. The two boys weren't meant to become pals. All for One wanted them to share no emotion. It would allow for rational and strategic thinking on the battlefield if one were put into a dire situation. They would have no problem doing the smarter thing and leaving the other behind. His vision for the boys was for the two to become perfect mirror reflections of himself. Before All for One could reply with a manipulative sentence to ensure the two wouldn't form any bond, Izuku hit him with another problematic pronouncement. By the way, today is the entrance exams for anybody to get into the UA. Thanks to you, I was planning on trying out, the green-haired boy told his teacher with glee. All for One would have scowled if he had a face. Instead, his body tensed with anger. He had more work cut out for him than he had thought. This boy he took under his wing was far too good-hearted. Midoriya was focused on becoming a hero more than anything. It was his passion, his heart's desire. All for One would need to change that. I think that they're undeserving of someone like you. It would be a waste of potential. All for One was careful with his response. He had come so far, he couldn't afford to push the boy away. Thanks for the concern, All for One, but I'll make the most of it. Midoriya thought his teacher was complimenting him. The manipulative tactics had gone unnoticed by the green-haired boy thus far. All for One's influence remained effective to a point. Izuku then noticed the time on a nearby hanging clock. Oh no, I'm going to be late. I'll see you around, All for One, Midoriya cried, as he started winding up into a hasty jog. Izuku called through the bedroom door his sparring partner resided in whilst brushing past it. Only once Midoriya had gotten outside did he use his quirk to pick up the pace. After the green-haired boy left, All for One let out an exasperated sigh. The inner gears of his mind worked overtime, as he tried to think of a plan on how to keep Izuku Midoriya under his persuasion. Being a master tactician, it didn't take long for the masked man to come up with a way to sabotage the entrance exam. All for One couldn't contain a sinister chuckle at the thought of framing the heroes, especially All Might. It didn't take long for Izuku to arrive at the exam site location. His face flushed red with embarrassment upon seeing the large crowd waiting out front. It made him realize he was the last to arrive. His eyes scanned the other competitors. Midoriya noticed a lot of them had quirks easy to identify just by their appearance. A girl with pink skin and hair, a boy with half his body encased in ice, another kid with some sort of device around their waist. Midoriya's train of thought was interrupted by the angry call of his name. Izuku felt his blood run cold, as he recognized who the voice belonged to. It was Kaken. The messy-haired blonde glared intensely at Midoriya with red eyes. What the hell do you think you're doing here, Deku? The blonde boy demanded rather than asked. Anger fumed out of Bakugo's mouth like a volcano preparing to erupt. Midoriya tapped his index fingers together awkwardly, not knowing what to do with his hands. He wanted to put them up defensively, but found himself fiddling with them instead. Kaken, oh you know, I just wanted to try out like I told you. No harm in trying, right? Izuku sputtered out quickly to try and explain himself to the childhood bully. Katsuki clenched his fist and raised it shakily over his head like he was about to swing it down on Midoriya. Deku, stay out of my way in there, was all the rage-filled boy could shout before storming off. Izuku let out a sigh of relief that he didn't know he was holding in. Despite finally having a quirk, and one that could top Bakugo's at that, Kaken was still pretty scary. The timid and shy voice of a girl behind Midoriya seemed to agree, as she said the same thing. That guy's pretty scary, huh? She asked. Izuku spun around with surprise at hearing a girl's voice, seeing the pretty short-haired brunette it belonged to. Midoriya was flabbergasted. No girl has ever spoken to him before, and here was one now. Yeah, Izuku ended up shouting the response like he had a megaphone. His hands found themselves cupping his mouth in embarrassment when he realized the mistake he had made. Izuku was sure that the girl would be repulsed by him now, but was surprised to hear her giggle instead. This made him blush cheek to cheek. If he weren't red enough already, he'd be the color of a tomato. Well, don't worry about him. You'll be fine, she said before walking away. Izuku tried to call after her through his self-made hand muzzle. Wait, I didn't get your name. The muffled cry never made it to the young girl's ears as she rejoined the waiting crowd. Midoriya kicked himself for missing the opportunity to get her name, but on the other hand, he talked to a girl. Izuku felt that his legs had turned to jelly, and that his chest became filled with helium. The amount of excitement the young boy had was the most he'd ever had. The only other time he got this happy was the first time All Might appeared. The green-haired boy remembered the long-lost forgotten years that he idolized the pro hero. He had rewatched the video recording uploaded to YouTube more than one could capably count. The footage was of a flipped-over bus covered in dark black pollution. Cries for help could be heard in the background. Suddenly, a muscular man stepped through the fog holding dozens of unconscious civilians. What had stood out about this hero was the eye-to-eye smile he had despite all of the wreckage around him. He had cried out the hopeful words, "Have no fear, for I am here." A small smile plastered itself on his lips thanks to the happy memory. He always looked up to the number one hero. All Might was eventually dubbed the symbol of peace thanks to how many criminals he put away. His smile put everyone at ease, truly making them believe everything was peaceful. Izuku wanted to share that ability. He wanted to become the next All Might. Now, he would surpass All Might, and be able to tell the next quirkless kid that it is possible to become a hero. The sound of a horn blaring snaps him out of his thoughts. Along with Izuku, everyone's attention turns to the speaker. This could only mean one thing: the entrance exam was about to begin. Midoriya's inner fanboy started to emerge, as he saw one of the pro heroes making the announcement. It was Hisashi Yamada, or, as people knew him by his hero name, Present Mike. That explained the loud boom of a siren that made everyone go silent. He was getting their attention. He sure was flashy with his appearance. Hisashi had his long blonde hair styled into a huge spike atop his head, likewise with the little mustache upon his lips formed into needles. The yellow color matched his sunglasses, the gold lens reflecting in the sunlight. The pro hero also wore a pair of headphones with the word Hage written on the headband. Yamada's costume was made up of black leather despite the red studded belt that held up his pants. However, what stood out most to Midoriya was the directional speaker completely covering his neck. Present Mike's voice boomed loud for the crowd to hear thanks to the speaker attached to the pro hero's outfit. "Everybody say HUI. Welcome to today's live performance," he shouted. The audience of super-powered children stared blankly back at him, not saying a word. Present Mike was just way too enthusiastic for the kids to handle. That didn't stop Hisashi from continuing his peppy announcement. "I'm here to present you with the guidelines of your first practical. Are you ready?" He boomed with extravagant hand movements. The second attempt to get the group of kids to join in failed just as miserably as the first time. Izuku could have sworn he heard crickets chirping. Was one of the people trying out using their quirk to make the noise? Could they control insects or something? The constant questions Midoriya made for himself went unanswered, as he focused on Present Mike's continued announcements. "Well, that's cool, my examinee listeners, cause here we go. After this presentation, you'll enter the testing location. Bring along whatever you want. You'll be experiencing 10-minute mock cityscape maneuvers, and this is how the test will go, my rad listeners." Present Mike adjusted his glasses as he prepared to explain the rules. Of course, playing the anti-hero is strictly prohibited, so there'll be no attacking the other examinees. Hisashi stated the first rule, which gained a grumble and glance from Bakugo. Izuku gulped with what he couldn't tell was worry or relief. The site is filled with 3 types of foe villains. Points are awarded for each one defeated, according to their respective difficulty levels. Use your quirks to disable these villains and earn points. That's your goal, listeners, Present Mike explained. One of the members of the audience raises their hand, an older test taker with eyeglasses and neatly styled hair. "May I ask a question?" he shouts loud enough for Present Mike to hear. "Go right ahead, cool cat," Present Mike responds while doing finger gun gestures at the examinee. The move gains groans from the crowd. "I was told by my brother that there would be 4 kinds of villains. Has this changed?" the well-groomed examinee asks. Present Mike chuckles. "Examinee 711, nice catch. Thanks, but the 4th villain is meant to be more of an obstacle that gives you 0 points if encountered," he explains briefly. After a quick pause, he finishes up the presentation. "Well, that's about all from me. I'll leave you all with our school motto now, plus ultra. Break a leg, kids," he exclaims, as the large doors behind him open up. And just like that, everyone rushes through the opening in a crazed frenzy. Midoriya stays back and watches as they all stumble over one another, only looking out for themselves. He could easily go around or through them, but he decides to just spectate for the time being. It's better to see these other people in action. That way Izuku can analyze their quirks and what the villains present. Mike spoke of are like. The blonde-haired examinee who had something around their waist Midoriya saw while waiting. He branches off from the crowd and puts his hands over his head like he's charging up his body. Then, from the metallic belt he's wearing comes an energy laser that destroys the first sighting of a villain. The foe villains, they're robots. That way you can use your quirk at no expense. Midoriya thought about going all out, but at the same time didn't want to steal the spotlight and draw too much attention. Instead, he stayed in the rear and continued watching as the other examinees plowed through more countless robots. At this rate, there would be none left for Izuku to take down. His eyes scanned the area for any available bots. Starting to panic he may not get any points in time. Then, like a genie granted his wish, he spots a robot all by its lonesome. Izuku gets into a running stance, prepared to charge the foe villain head-on when something rams into him from behind. "Out of my way, Deku, or I'll kill you," Bakugo threatens as he shoves Izuku aside. Once the opening is clear, Katsuki releases a powerful explosive blast from his hands that destroys the robot Midoriya intended to get. Izuku feels tears starting to come from the edges of his eyes, but refuses to let Kaken prevent him from achieving his goal another time. He wipes the water away from his eyes and gets back up. There was bound to be another robot around here somewhere. The only problem was there weren't any more robots. The examinees had already destroyed them all. Just as Midoriya thought it was all over, the ground began to tremble like an earthquake shaking the site. The source of the rupture made itself known, as the ground beneath everyone tore apart, and a massive robot surfaced. It must be the fourth bot present, Mike mentioned. Everybody began running the other way, some screaming, and pushing others to the side. It was every man and woman for themselves, the complete opposite of what a hero's ideology should be. They were all cowards, casting one another aside to save their own skin. Izuku thought Bakugo was the only one willing to be a hero that shared this selfish personality. But he was wrong. Everybody had this mentality. Midoriya's small smile from earlier diminished as he came to this realization. Heroes were supposed to help people. Everyone here had run the other way. Were the pro-heroes the same way? The tears Izuku held back earlier started falling down his face, as his heart broke for the second time that year. First it was All Might that he lost faith in, now it was every other hero too. Young Midoriya turned around and began heading in the same direction everyone else was going. Unlike them, he just walked, no running necessary. He was far too sorrowful, and had nowhere he wanted to go anyhow. The only thing that stopped him was the screaming of someone in need of help. Midoriya turned back around to face the giant robot, and saw the source of the scream came from the girl he had met earlier. The massive machine had her in its clutches, and looked to be squeezing her tighter and tighter. Was the robot really going to crush her? From the viewing box that Udade had set up for the faculty and pro-heroes to watch from, the onlookers started to panic, as well. The foe villains had been designed to subdue the examinees, not harm them. However, this machine was doing much more than hurt the poor girl. It was going to kill her. The heroes sprung into action and joined the fray to evacuate the other examinees. Izuku noticed none of them were going to rescue the girl who was in danger though. Through his eyes, they were all cowards. He got into a running stance again, and began to calculate what it would take for him to reach such a high velocity and destroy the robot. Just as Midoriya was about to use his quirk to save the girl, he heard the all too familiar voice saying, "Smash." Above him, All Might rocketed into the robot, and shattered it with a single punch. The metal began to splinter, as if it were merely wood. However, this had a backlash, and the machine released its hold on the girl it had taken hostage. All Might didn't seem to notice, or he just wasn't fast enough to see and catch the falling girl. Izuku let out a worried gasp before crouching down with all of the strength he could muster, and like All Might had done when he soared off into the sky the day they met, Izuku leaped high into the air. The amount of force he put into the kickoff had been enough to get him at least mid-level altitude. Midoriya felt relief wash over him like an ocean, as he also perfectly timed the jump so he could intercept the falling girl. However, that relief was short-lived, as he began plummeting back towards the ground. Just as he thought they were about to hit the pavement and become as flat as a pancake, a miracle happened. Izuku and the girl he was holding began to levitate. They floated mid-air for what felt for a few seconds before it released, and they returned to the ground. Izuku noticed the girl he had caught was looking rather exhausted, making him wonder if the levitation had been part of her quirk. As if to confirm it was, she then puked from how much effort she had put into stopping them. Izuku jumped back to avoid getting any of the vomit on him, giving a small shout of surprise. "Are you okay?" he asked through an equally exhausted voice. The girl nodded her head before giving him a thumbs up. The two exchanged smiles, both just happy they were alive. "Well done, young man," All Might said whilst landing in between them. "I couldn't have done it better myself," he said. Midoriya frowned, disgusted by the mere sight of All Might. What everyone believed to be the world's #1 hero had nearly let a young girl die. From Izuku's perspective, it looked like the symbol of peace had only cared about getting the credit for destroying the rogue robot. Midoriya believed that All Might only cared about the fame and glory he would receive from the media by taking out the machine. "Hey, wait a minute, I remember you. Didn't you say you didn't have a quirk?" All Might exclaimed upon recognizing the green-haired boy. "What?" the girl who had hurled earlier exclaimed in shock. From the way Izuku launched himself into the air, it sure seemed like he had won. Midoriya shrugged it off. "I didn't," he simply says before brushing past All Might. Their shoulders bump against each other as he walks past. Izuku kneels down next to the girl he had rescued. "So, what's your name?" he asks shyly. "Oh, I'm Achiko Uraraka," she replies whilst blushing profusely. She was just as shy as Izuku. This boy had just saved her life. Izuku's blush matched that of Achiko's. "Since when did I get so confident?" the green-haired boy asked himself internally. "I'm Izuku Midoriya," the young boy says whilst helping Uraraka to her feet. All Might twiddles his thumbs awkwardly throughout the whole transaction. He's like a third wheel, and it's really weird. Young Midoriya, could I speak to you alone for a moment? All Might interrupts the two with his question, which makes Izuku's annoyance for the hero double in growth. An elderly woman whose height is barely that of Izuku's waist level works her way over to the trio. The old lady uses a giant syringe as a cane to walk. The prop matches her getup rather well. Her whole outfit resembles a doctor or a nurse, the only difference being a pink helmet and visor for her to see better through an optical. Midoriya's inner fanboy recognizes her instantly as the hero called Recovery Girl. Come now dear, we should get you checked out anyway, Recovery Girl says whilst pulling Ochako away. Oh okay, see you later Izuku, Ochako says over her shoulder, as the two girls leave the boys alone. Young Midoriya, you asked me if you could be a hero without a quirk. I don't know how, but I just watched you perform an astounding feat, and proved me wrong when I told you it was impossible. Because of this I want to offer you the chance to gain a quirk, All Might says. All Might must have thought that Izuku still didn't have a quirk, but what caught Midoriya off guard was the mention of being given a quirk. Did All Might know All for One? Or did he share the same ability to transfer quirks? Regardless, he wouldn't accept the offer from All Might. He already had a teacher, and it was All for One. The same man who had shown support for Izuku when nobody else did. The man who tried telling him that he was meant for greater than these other kids, that he could be a true hero. No thanks All Might, I'll be fine without your quirk, the green-haired boy replied dryly. This caught the pro-hero off guard, but not in the way it should have. All Might had newfound respect for the boy, thinking that Izuku meant he would rather get by quirkless, while in reality Izuku was saying that he had a better one. Very well, All Might replied. He gave a thumbs up while saying, plus ultra, before flying off. Izuku had always wanted to go to the U.A, and now he couldn't. He had gained 0 points given the time to destroy the foe villains. However, this didn't faze him one bit. After witnessing what the media would come to call a malfunction with one of the robots, along with the true mentality of these so-called heroes, Midoriya didn't want to go to the school anymore. Even if he had all the points in the world, he would turn down the chance to go to the UA. He now agreed with All for One that he was destined for more, unknowing that All for One had been the one to sabotage the robot to begin with. Sorry All Might, I already have a quirk, Midoriya said before using his quirk to speed off. His quirk was super speed. All for One had succeeded in coaxing young Midoriya to stray from joining UA. The green-haired boy returned to what had been his training facility, and shared the news with his teacher. All for One had a sinister smirk under his mask not visible to Izuku, allowing for the man to put on the perfect facade. He pretended to be surprised upon hearing about the malfunctioning robot. What really sold his performance was the real shock of listening to Midoriya explain what he had seen and believed about the other examinees. The boy had lost his faith in the heroes. Things had turned out better for All for One than he had previously hoped. I should have listened to you. I'm sorry, Izuku said upon finishing his recap of the entrance exam. The green-haired boy had to fight back tears. He felt childish for not originally listening to his teacher. All for One had not only given him his quirk, but had shown so much support throughout Midoriya's training. The young boy felt selfish for not following the teacher's orders sooner. Whatever his newfound master had planned for him, he was prepared to gladly accept it. You only did what you believed to be right at the time. I won't hold it against you, All for One replied. Izuku was grateful to hear such words, unknowing that they were entirely manipulative. You told me you believed I was destined for more than what U.A had to offer. What did you mean by that? Midoriya eagerly asked. The sadistic smile widened in length under All for One's mask. Yes, I will personally teach you how to improve your quirk and overcome any obstacles it comes with. Unlike U.A, you will be provided one-on-one training, the man answered. Midoriya couldn't help but smile. His hero training would be 10 times more beneficial than the other students. So when do we start? What's the next step? Izuku asked. Doing what those so-called heroes won't. You'll kill your enemies to ensure they would no longer pose a threat, All for One responded with glee. Midoriya felt his brain just short-circuited. Kill? Me kill someone? The young boy thought. After your first, the rest become easy. I understand why you would find this to be unsettling. All for One took notice of Izuku's expression, and decided to tread carefully on the topic. Geez, All for One, I don't know if I'm capable of just killing someone, you know? Even if they are bad, Midoriya replied whilst fidgeting with himself. The subject was so disturbing. The masked man couldn't contain an exasperated sigh, as he tried to think of a way to convince Midoriya that murder was necessary. How many times has All Might or another pro-hero captured someone that just ended up breaking out of prison anyways? This would prevent such a thing from happening, All for One tried reasoning. Yeah, but Midoriya pondered the statement, and started seeing All for One's point. That still doesn't make murder okay. Izuku held to his ideals. Is it murder when it's done in self-defense? I don't think so. The same could be said for when you're saving somebody. It makes no difference. All for One countered Izuku's statement. Midoriya had no more of an argument, but the expression on his face still helped All for One know the boy hadn't changed his mind just yet. The masked man rubbed the blank spot on his face where the temple of his nose would be if he still had one. It took him a few seconds to think of another example he could use to try and waver Midoriya. What if someone was trying to harm your mother? The vile man asked. His grin was a mischievous one, still unseen due to his life support gear. Izuku felt a mix of crude emotions upon thinking about a villain attacking his mom. Anger swelled deep within him, rising upwards like a volcano about to erupt. The scenarios running through young Midoriya's mind made him bite back an agonizing shout. The amount of sorrow he would feel if he lost his mother came full circle just at the thought, making sure that fighting back tears wasn't an option. What would you do to that person? All for One questioned with excitement to hear the green-haired boy's answer. Surely, this would persuade the boy. I'd send them to jail just like any other criminal. Midoriya huffed out despite his emotions. This infuriated All for One, making the masked man want to lash out at Izuku and show him his disappointment in a physical demeanor. However, the powerful being prevented himself from losing control and released the emotion through disapproving words. Why? Why can't you see the bigger picture? Is it because you're just a child? That should be no excuse. You have to overcome your weaknesses if you're ever to surpass All Might. All for One scolded Midoriya. Izuku found himself flinching at the end of every sentence. He didn't mean to upset his sensei so much. All for One thought carefully about his next words. What if scenarios weren't enough for this child? He needed to share a true story with the boy to win him over. That made him think of the other disciple he took under his wing finally. That blue-haired brat would be good for something. Let me tell you a story about Tamura. All for One gained Izuku's undivided attention from the remark. He suffered from an incident where no hero came to save him. The masked man began to explain. As a child, younger than he is now, Tamura lost both his parents to what you would call a villain. People who passed by never offered to help him. They assumed that a hero would take care of it. Due to this, the man who had killed Tamura's mother and father was able to take advantage of the boy. All for One said while trying to hold back a laugh. He was fortunate for the mask on this day. It was covering a lot of his true nature. The villain had stimulated Tamura to blame society for the reason he wasn't saved sooner. He used this incident to create a hatred for heroes within Tamura's mindset. All for One spoke on behalf of his own manipulation to an oblivious Izuku. It was only after I arrived and rescued him that I could deflate this mentality. All for One lied. You killed the villain? Izuku asked despite knowing the obvious answer. Now you understand that if this man was vanquished sooner, Tamura wouldn't have suffered such a fate. All for One believed he had succeeded in winning Izuku over. The masked menace had originally planned to groom Tamura Shigaraki into becoming his successor, but now he was fully invested in providing Izuku Midoriya with this role. The green-haired boy had a long and slow upbringing ahead of him, but he'd make a powerful opponent to the next one for all users someday. All for One couldn't be any more proud of how well things were turning out. I just don't know if I'm able to take another person's life no matter how bad they are. Izuku was still unsure of himself, but All for One had succeeded in planting the seed within the boy's mind. For now that was enough to satisfy the masked menace. In time, you will come to accept what must be done. For now, go home and get some rest. You had a long day. All for One pretended to care for the boy's well-being. While he did want Izuku to become his successor, the boy was always expendable, as long as All for One had Tamura. Tomorrow, you and Tamura will begin your real training, All for One said before adding, make sure you look out for him. I told you this before, he still has so much to learn. Izuku nodded in response while making the silent vow that he would watch over Tamura like a brother. With that all said and done, Midoriya finally returned home. Even after all the chaos that ensued from the morning, his wild adventure wasn't done just yet. Waiting for him when he got home was the furthest from what he expected. A girl. Not any girl, but the girl, Ochako Uraraka. Izuku felt like he was about to pass out upon seeing her wave from the dinner table with his mom. How long had she been here? What did his mom discuss with her? Izuku had so many questions that he felt like his head was about to explode. Welcome home, sweetie. Come have a seat. Your friend decided to stop by. Izuku's mom greeted her son with a flimsy explanation. Uraraka-san, what are you doing here? Izuku asked with curiosity and confusion. Oh, I wanted to bring you this, Ochako replied while placing a small package on the table. Huh, what's that? Izuku only had more questions, as he took the box so he could examine it. Both Ochako and Izuku's mother couldn't contain themselves anymore. You got into U.A. They cried out at the same time. If he was confused before, there were no words for how contorted Izuku was now. But I had 0 points, was all he could manage to say. Ochako couldn't help but blush as she explained the first part of the story. Yeah, I kinda knew that after the entrance exam ended. I asked President Mike if I could lend you some of the points I earned to try and return the favor of you saving me. That's when he explained a secret point system based on rescues. Secret point system, Izuku muttered, as he tried to process what Uraraka had told him. So I then asked if I could be the one to share the good news and bring you your acceptance package. Achiko finished the explanation with a small giggle. Izuku could see that the news excited both girls who stood in front of him, but couldn't accept the offer. He felt bad, as he said, "I'm sorry, but I can't go. I'm declining the offer." The two girls looked at Izuku like he sprouted a third eye. "But sweetie, you've always wanted to go to the U.A," Midoriya's mom said. "I changed my mind." Izuku couldn't tell them the details about All for One, so he gave a brief answer. "Come on, you've gotta go to the U.A. How else would you become a hero?" Achiko pouted. Izuku had to fight the urge to tell about his alternative. "I'll find a way," he muttered. "You're the only one who didn't run away when that robot grabbed me. They saw the potential. You have to be a good hero. And I do too. Please go to school with me," Achiko begged. The two girls held their hands together pleadingly as they waited for Izuku's response. Midoriya thought about his agreement with All for One. He'd already let his teacher down once before. Izuku remembered what the masked man had told him about killing people. It made his decision waver between the two options. In the end, he decided it didn't hurt to try and go to the U.A for at least one day. "Okay, fine. I'll give it a shot," Midoriya replied. His answer gained a cheerful jump and applause from each of the girls before his mother ran over to hug him. "Mum," Izuku groaned with embarrassment as Achiko held back a laugh. "So Achiko, would you like to join us for dinner?" Midoriya's mom offered. "I'd love to, but I have to get home now actually. Thanks for inviting me in. I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku," Achiko replied before leaving. Once the girl was gone, the two green-haired family members shared an awkward look. "So a girl, huh?" Midoriya's mom teased. "Mum," Izuku groaned, as his face flushed red with embarrassment again. The next day, Izuku strolled over to the U.A early in the morning so he could give it a shot, as he had promised Ochako. Upon arriving sooner than anyone else, he could completely take in the atmosphere. The hero school's appearance sure lived up to its reputation. The hype surrounding the place was surreal. "Deku!" An angry roar broke Midoriya out of his peaceful thoughts. Of course, the taunting nickname came from his childhood bully again. Katsuki Bakuga had gotten into the hero course as well. "How the hell did a quirkless loser like you get into U.A?" the aggravated boy cried out. "There was a secret point system based on rescuing people. I guess I passed by getting those," Izuku explained to the pointy-haired blonde. Midoriya didn't think about his next words. "And I'm not quirkless. Not anymore." "What did you say?" Bakugo seethed through his teeth, his fists clenched in anger. Izuku instantly realized his mistake and stumbled to make up an excuse. Why yeah, I finally developed it," Midoriya sputtered out with a nervous laugh. "You think this is funny, Deku?" Bakugo shouted in anger. "Whatever your quirk is, it still doesn't make you better than me," Katsuki declared whilst using his explosion quirk to launch himself at Izuku. Thanks to the super speed quirk bestowed upon him by All for One, Midoriya steps to the side and dodges the oncoming attack. Upon realizing he just made Bakugo miss, Izuku smiles with newfound confidence. "How can you say that when you can't even touch me?" Izuku taunted his former bully. "I'll kill you." Katsuki tries hitting Midoriya with another controlled blast, but the green-haired boy dodges it just as easily as the first attack. All the training Izuku did with Tamura paid off. With the provided opening, Izuku decides to go on the offense and charges Bakugo before the boy can get another explosion off. In the midst of the battle, Izuku becomes careless and forgets to pull his punches, as he had been doing during his training. The amount of force put into the fist that collides with Katsuki shatters the blonde-haired boy's bones, although he'd been hit by a train. Izuku doesn't seem to notice while he's still moving at such a fast pace, continuing the assault with another punch just as powerful. Bakugo coughs up what looks to be gallons of blood, as the impact sends the boy flying back. Upon seeing the red liquid spray across the pavement, Izuku stops and watches as Katsuki crashes into a nearby tree. The trunk splinters from the velocity that Bakugo crashes through it with. Izuku stands still with his extended fist for a moment, in disbelief of what had just happened. Katsuki was unmoving in a pile of broken bark, bones, and a crazy amount of blood. Even though it was an accident, Midoriya was pretty sure that he had just killed Kaken. The green-haired boy begins to panic as he looks around the area for help. Upon seeing that nobody else is in the vicinity, Izuku runs over to the battered boy. "Kaken, are you okay?" he calls out. When he receives no response, Izuku clutches his head in agony. Katsuki was a jerk, but he didn't deserve to die. The green-haired boy sobs over Bakugo's corpse before fully processing what he had just done. He killed someone. He was bound to go to jail. The punishment for such a crime would be severe. He'd never be a hero now, so Izuku did the only thing he knew how to do anymore. He ran. News spread quickly about the prospective Udata student being discovered in a moribund state on the campus. Several pro-heroes turned teachers rushed the kid to a hospital for medical professionals to perform an attempt at saving the boy's life. The staff and school faculty had to practically hold back Katsuki's mother as she raved about getting through to see her son. She made it clear where the Bakugo boy got his short-tempered attitude, while Katsuki's father remained rational and tried calming his wife down. The entire situation was a nightmare nobody had expected. Katsuki had continuous convulsions and needed his heart restarted numerous times as doctors tried to save the young boy's life. The hospital went through 3 defibrillators due to the amount of flatlines and had requested the aid of recovery girl. The elder woman's Quirk, heal, was put to its limits as she tried repairing the child's fractured ribs. The pro-hero's Quirk allows for her to amplify and speed up the body's healing process. However, the process uses large amounts of energy and could potentially kill. Considering the state young Bakugo is already in, she's given no other choice than to exceed this side effect and hope for the best. After countless hours with no end, the Bakugo boy is finally in a stable state. The worried parents are given the relieving news, but aren't allowed to rejoice for too long. Despite the miracle of Katsuki's survival, they believed the boy would never be capable of moving again. The injuries that young Bakugo sustained resulted in every kind of paralysis, varying from hemiplegia to paraplegia, and so forth into quadriplegia. Katsuki was now a victim of severe palsy. The parents wept at the awful news, not yet receiving more grief. Aside from their son's paralysis, he would be bound to experience at least 7 seizures a day. The doctors informed the distressed mother and father the last detail of horrid information. Although they saved his life today, Katsuki's lifespan was surely cut in half after this experience. The terrible fate bestowed onto the boy had caused a dreaded thought to cross everyone's mind. Was it even worth saving Katsuki's life? That question would soon be answered if Katsuki could inform the pro-heroes who had done this to him. The teachers who had rushed the boy to the hospital accompanied All Might, Recovery Girl, and the Udata principal named Nizu within Katsuki's room. The two that found Katsuki and got him to medical attention were Shota Aizawa and Ken Ishiyama. These 2 heroes were otherwise known as Eraserhead and Cementos. The Bakugo boy had been comatose until only a minute ago. As soon as he was awake, the heroes wanted to learn everything they could from the witness. Despite the humanoid block of cement appearance, Ken Ishiyama's heart went out to the boy. He was often quite caring for the well-being of others beneath his rough exterior. Shota Aizawa was often quite the opposite, usually looking although he had just rolled out of bed. However, in this moment, Eraserhead's tired and droopy eyes took in the disconsolate sight of Katsuki Bakugo rendered useless. The principal named Nizu was the first to speak. "Hello Katsuki. We would like to ask you a few questions if you're up to it," he said politely. It may have come off as eccentric, as Nexus appearance, due to how disturbing seeing a young boy beaten within a centimeter of his life had impacted the principal. Nizu scratched the back of his ear anxiously. It made him resemble an animal more than he already did. The short principal looked to be a combination of several species ranging from a mouse to a dog or bear. Nizu mostly resembled a standing humanoid mouse, but possessed dog-like paws and a bear-shaped face. If this weren't enough, a defining feature was the large scar that stretched across his right eye. Bakugo's eyes looked to be completely shut, but a small sliver of sight allowed him to make out blurry figures of the heroes standing in his room. Katsuki was entirely unaware of what had happened. The last thing he remembered was an immense pain caused by Deku. The messy-haired blonde growled with prodigious hatred. Just speaking those simple syllables made his throat feel although it had a foot pressed against it. The group of pro-heroes exchanged confused glances. Who or what is Deku? Nizu continued being the voice for his allies. Katsuki struggled to sit up, realizing not a single joint in his body was responding. The young boy started to panic. He felt although he was just a floating embodiment. The pressure and force Bakugo exerted to attempt moving anything he could strained every muscle he had, which resulted in a severe spasm. The boy panicked upon realizing that he had been completely paralyzed. Deku, Katsuki cried out in agony. Bakugo's throat felt although it had been ripped out after shouting, but it was nowhere near the amount of pain his body excreted in response to Katsuki's order to move. Katsuki remembered now, he had been bested by his rival, and now he was made worthless. Restraining him, the recovery girl ordered, as the boy's body convulsed. Like the perfect team, Aizawa follows the command by using a cloth made out of steel wire alloy woven with carbon nanofibers to create the perfect immobilizing bonds. With Katsuki held down by Aizawa's cloth restraints, doctors and nurses rush into the room to apply more anesthetic. Several needles inject the boy with ketamine to make him slip back into a sedated state. When Bakugo finally ceases to seize for the moment given, Shota retracts his bonds. Deku, Katsuki murmurs to himself quietly, as he falls back asleep. My god, he's delusional. All Might says while rubbing his distressed face. The pro-hero always blamed himself for not rescuing people put into these conditions. Sometimes, even the symbol of peace couldn't save everybody. Deku must be the person who did this to him. The way he says the name, it's terrifying, Cementos evaluates. Whoever this Deku may be, we still have no clue as to why they would attack young Bakugo. Niza turns his attention away from the injured boy and focuses on resolving the matter. Whoever they are, they must be truly evil to harm a child. All Might fails to contain his anger. Whatever their reasoning, they may try again given the intel that Katsuki Bakugo survived. Aizawa considers. What are you suggesting? Cementos asks. I think it's obvious. We mustn't allow this Deku to discover young Bakugo is alive, Niza concludes. Telling the press that we allowed for a child to die on our watch won't do any good, All Might says. He wants the world to feel safe. Telling everyone a kid had been murdered despite several heroes being present would diminish that resolve. Perhaps, but it's the only way to keep Katsuki safe. Niza responds whilst putting his hands behind his back. The position was one he often did when making up his mind. It's a sacrifice we'll have to make until we capture Deku. Aizawa agrees with the principle. It was then decided that Katsuki Bakugo had died. The only people who knew the truth were Katsuki's parents and the pro-heroes present. The doctors and nurses who tended to young Bakugo's well-being kept the deep-guarded secret hidden, as well. Everyone at Udade mourned the loss of their fellow classmate, and the world recoiled in horror after hearing such dreadful news. Meanwhile, Izuku Midoriya had run back to All For One's base. The masked man was shocked to say the least upon getting a hug from the sobbing boy. All For One's instinct reaction was to try and pry the kid off, but he soon realized that the child wouldn't let go easily. Though he truly didn't feel the emotion, he held Izuku in return to console the boy. Whatever the reason for Midoriya's crying, All For One intended to use it to his advantage. If manipulating Izuku required him to form a relationship with the boy, he intended to do just that. What's wrong, Izuku? All For One asked in a calm and collective reassuring voice. I killed someone, Midoriya cried out in between sniffling sobs. The boy broke down even more after saying it out loud. All For One felt a smirk forming at the corner of his mouth beneath the life support mask he always wore during Izuku's visits. I see. Was it someone you know? All For One asked. Why yes, Izuku said in a muffled cry against All For One's already wrinkled suit. The masked man was bliss upon hearing that answer. All For One had originally intended to have Izuku kill someone randomly selected. It would have gotten through the boy's barrier and allowed for expansion provided a slow burn. However, his troubles were now eased considering Midoriya had killed someone he already formed a relationship with. Killing someone you've gotten to know is more impactful than a random bystander. Regardless, All For One cared for none of the people he murdered, and he intended to share that ability with Izuku. Tell me about this person. Who were they to you? All For One asked, as the two finally broke the forced embrace. The masked man patted himself down, as if he had gotten dirty from the hug. He was my friend, but then he bullied me. But he didn't deserve this. I didn't mean to do it. I accidentally dash. Izuku's panic attack returned, as he tried to explain the situation. It was too much for the green-haired boy to recall, as if he were reliving the scenario just by mentioning it. Calm down. All For One's tone was a stern one now. Take it slow, the masked man ordered. Kaken Midoriya caught himself using the blonde-haired boy's nickname. Izuku felt, although he didn't deserve to use it, as if he lost those privileges. Katsuki was my friend from long ago. He started bullying me after he got his quirk, but I lost control. I forgot to pull my punch, and the green-haired boy started to explain their relationship. All For One got the gist of it, and nodded in understanding. You needn't feel bad. Think of it as revenge for all the times he's hurt you, the masked man suggested. Izuku shook his head defiantly, refusing to accept that resolve. No, I never wanted to get back at him. I just wanted his approval, to prove to him we were equals, and for us to, despite all he's done, for us to be friends again, Midoriya replied. You're forgetting that I saw what he did to you. He got his thrill from watching you suffer. You wouldn't consider someone like that ever becoming a hero, would you? All For One slyly responded. Izuku thought carefully about his teacher's statement. Midoriya recalled watching the examinees running from the rogue robot, and All Might's answer to his question. Someone like Katsuki Bakugo fell into the category of these false idols. As if All For One could read the green-haired boy's thoughts, the next statement out of the masked man's mouth fractured Izuku's mind a little more. You did the world a favor by ridding of the would-be hero. He didn't deserve that title, and now everyone will benefit from his death. All For One twisted Izuku's thoughts into demented ones. Still, Midoriya tried to push the inner demons away. I don't know if I killed him. Kaken Katsuki. Izuku ran a hand through his messy green hair. The argument felt more like an excuse. Think of it as your first step in the right direction despite any negativity. A necessary sacrifice, if you will. All For One continued to push the matter. The masked man motioned for Izuku to follow him. Come with me. I think I have a solution to your problem, All For One said. The green-haired boy wiped tears from his eyes as his legs moved on their own in the same direction as his master. The two entered a room Midoriya remembered from their first meeting, a place containing various water tanks. Each one appeared to have been opened, the contents inside now missing. "I want you to see one of my best creations, all for one," Izuku said with delight. Then, like a showman, the masked man gestured to an approaching humanoid creature. Midoriya cowered over the being that towered over him. The thing was 10 times his size. "I call it Nomu." All for one chuckled with pride for his creation. "What is it?" Izuku asked while trying to gulp back his fear. The monstrous beast was a gruesome sight, its brain exposed and bulging from its head. The mouth was more of a giant beak with the sharpest fangs seen to man. Nomu's muscular body had many scars on it, likely a result of All for One's experimentation. A genetically enhanced artificial human containing more than one quirk. All for One described his vision for the beast. Nomu was the only thing capable of wielding several quirks other than its creator. "Human, yeah," Izuku nervously laughed as he gazed up at the powerful monster. "The best part. This is only one of thousands," All for One adds. Midoriya jumps with shock from both the statement and surprise of being able to feel more fear than he already had. "You made more of these things," Izuku shouts. "They aren't all as perfect as the first, but yes, the number will eventually rise to the millions, and hopefully someday billions," All for One replies. Izuku didn't need to see an expression on All for One's blank face to see how passionate the man was about the Nomu project. Midoriya almost regretted asking, "What are they for?" All for One took a moment of silence before turning to face Midoriya. "You," he said. Izuku was taken aback by the answer, wondering what his master could possibly mean. "Given the numbers, you can use the Nomus as practice for killing people. Destroy as many of them as you want. It'll only improve your inability to murder and skills in combat." All for One answered the boy's unspoken question. Izuku was speechless. He went from killing his childhood bully to the task of eliminating these creatures. It hardly seemed a reasonable way to justify the murder, but it was all Midoriya had to vent his frustrations on. Again, although All for One could read the child's mind, he leaves Izuku to begin slaughtering the Nomus. The enormous muscular one that was used as an introduction to the monsters followed its creator like a lovesick puppy. Izuku doesn't wait long before jumping off the catwalk and rushing the smaller Nomus. His philosophy seemed to begin piecing itself together like a puzzle with every other punch. Izuku started off attacking the science projects with controlled attacks, releasing force into the tip of his finger to blow them back. By the time he dived deep into the inner thoughts of his mind, Midoriya was swatting them aside like annoying bugs. The Nomus attacked in swarms, but it was nothing more than a person stomping on powerless ants. Izuku thought about what his master had told him. "I did everyone a favor ridding the world of someone like Kaken," he muttered out loud to one of the Nomus striking at him. Izuku stepped aside and easily dodged the attack before delivering a powerful blow to the creature. Another Nomu tried grabbing Midoriya from behind, but the green-haired boy was far faster. Izuku spun around and flicked the humanoid across the room. They would have never known about his bullying. How Katsuki told me to jump off a building. He could have made me commit suicide. The world would have surely idolized him, and his quirk, like everyone else, has his entire life. Izuku vented to the army of remaining Nomus. The sheer velocity of Midoriya charging the creatures was enough to wipe them out like a bowling ball hitting pins. How many others like him have become pro-heroes? Will become pro-heroes? Izuku questioned Nomus like it was an interrogation. The boy's frustrations could no longer be suppressed as he reached a mental breakdown. "I can't stop at him. I need to liberate the world of other false heroes," Midoriya vowed to himself. A single Nomu remained, backing away with the same terrified look Izuku gave Katsuki when he was bullied. Midoriya clenched his fist, only fueled with anger by the reminder. "You called me Deku. Fine, I'll let that be a memento to you, my first kill. I'll make it a name to be remembered." Izuku spoke to Nomu, as if it were Katsuki. Izuku had no problem this time when he struck Nomu with an uncontrolled punch. Young Midoriya imagined the moment exactly as it happened, reliving it in vivid detail. The Nomu appeared to him, although it was Katsuki Bakugu, a completely powerless boy that couldn't defend himself against the barrage of punches. Izuku found himself laughing as he pummeling the creature. The onslaught went on until all that remained was a pile of what looked like black mashed potatoes. Tamura Shigaraki watched from the catwalk, crouching down in the shadows as he tried to remain unnoticed. His eyes were fixated on Midoriya, completely immersed in watching the green-haired boy's massacre. Tamura clenched the catwalk's railing, his knuckles turning white from the pressure he applied by squeezing it. The blue-haired boy felt envy for his peer's power. The rivalry was bound to blossom and grow. Tamura studied Izuku from that point forward, realizing that if he were to ever defeat such an opponent in combat, he'd need to know how they fight. Izuku Midoriya was completely unaware that Katsuki Bakuga survived. His entire ideology now changed due to this belief. Young Midoriya stopped dead in his tracks upon seeing a police cruiser outside his house. The green-haired boy felt his blood run as cold as the sweat profusely dripping down his face. Izuku resisted the urge to run the other way and take refuge with All for One, but not without a struggle. Midoriya's mind tackled the argument whether or not he left any evidence for the police to trace back to him. Only one thought made him take the leap of faith by entering the house. My mom lives here too. What if something happened to her, and that's why they're here? Izuku and his mother were both relieved to see one another unharmed as she ran over to hug her son. Izuku, thank goodness you're okay, she cried out whilst holding the boy closely. The green-haired child looked over his mother's shoulder and took notice of a single detective seated at the kitchen table. The man wore a tan overcoat with a matching hat. He stood up to join the others, removing his hat and placing it against his chest to greet Izuku. The detective held out his hand for the boy to shake. You must be Izuku. Your mother told me a lot about you. My name is Naomasa Tsukachi. I work for the police force. The detective introduced himself, while young Midoriya reluctantly shook his hand. May I ask what you're doing here, sir? Izuku did his best to play off any apprehensive qualities. His mother, Izuku Midoriya, had taught Izuku to always be respectful. The green-haired boy did his best to keep proper manners in the company of the authority figure. Naomasa placed the hat back on his head as Izuku led the boys back into the kitchen. This morning, a tragic murder was discovered outside of U.A. The detective responded. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck nervously. What's terrible? What happened? Who was it? Izuku pretended to be oblivious to the matter. Izuku placed her hands on the young boy's shoulders. Sweetie Katsuki was the one found dead, she gingerly told Izuku. Nobody knew the truth about young Bakugo, but the atmosphere felt like a funeral already taking place. Izuku felt that although he had already come to terms with the death, hearing it from his mother made him break down again. She held him reassuringly, as he sobbed, either her nor the detective knowing the tears were because he was believed to have killed Katsuki. It's my understanding you and the deceased were friends, the detective interjected awkwardly. Izuku grimaced at the word friend, but bit his tongue to prevent saying anything crude about Katsuki. Before young Midoriya could explain the complicated relationship, his mother did the favor. They were at some point, but it ended after Katsuki developed his quirk. Izuku put it into layman's terms. Izuku worried the detective would take it as an incentive to believe he had proper motives. Oh, regardless, I'm sorry you have to go through the loss of someone you knew, Naomasa replied. Izuku let out a sigh of relief whilst wiping the tears from his eyes. He believed the detective had only stopped by to deliver the unsavory news about Katsuki Bakugo. Surely, the other students at U.A. were being given the same treatment. However, Izuku would come to find that Naomasa wasn't finished. Before I let myself out, I wanted to address something else that concerned me, the detective started. All students and faculty were accounted for that day except for you. Apparently Izuku never showed up for class. I was just wondering where you were at the time, Naomasa questioned. Izuku was more shocked than Izuku by this statement. You didn't go to school, she asked her son. The green-haired boy had to fight back a nervous sweat. The questions made him feel like he was being interrogated. Young Midoriya stuttered, as he tried to murmur out any excuse he could come up with. The detective cocked an eyebrow in curiosity. You saw something, didn't you? Naomasa asked. Izuku felt a little of his worry drown out with the sinking of his shoulders. Tsukachi thought he had witnessed the murder, and ran away in fear. Izuku decided to go with that story. It was his only feasible alibi. Yes, Izuku lied with a shameful tone. Izuku was too shocked to speak. What did you see? The detective asked whilst crouching down to Izuku's height. Izuku thought of the furthest description from his appearance, and rolled with that. An adult, he had red hair, and looked to be quite muscular. I knew I couldn't take him in a fight, so I ran away to try and look for help. Young Midoriya put on an act, as if he were ashamed of his fake actions. The detective wrote down Izuku's description in a notepad before standing back up. Don't be too hard on yourself, kid. You did the right thing, Naomasa reassured the boy before ruffling Izuku's green hair. Will that be all, detective? Izuku asked. She was worried about her son's emotional state and wanted to give him a break from having to relive the situation. Yes, I think I've got everything I need for now. If there's anything else, I'll be investigating on campus, so you can just find me at U.A. Naomasa says, as he opens the door to leave. Actually, Mr. Tsukachi, I don't think I want to attend U.A. anymore, Izuku calls after the detective. The statement catches both Naomasa and Izuku by surprise. Not this again, I thought you decided to give it a try. Izuku crouched down to speak with her son. Izuku couldn't look his mother in the eyes, as he lied to her. I did, but after this Katsuki, he died their mom. The green-haired boy used the murder as an excuse. Izuku nodded in understanding. Okay, I want you to be safe too, she said. Aizawa won't be happy to hear one of his students decided to drop out, but I understand. My condolences and best wishes. You two enjoy the rest of your night, the detective said before closing the door behind him on his way out. Izuku pretended to hug his mother in sorrow, burying his face in her stomach so she couldn't see the small smile forming upon his lips. Not only was Midoriya relieved that he evaded suspicion in Katsuki's murder, but tomorrow marked his first day working with All for One to become a true hero. Meanwhile, Katsuki's parents were finally allowed to sneak into his room for a visit. The messy-haired blonde didn't change the skull plastered across his face despite seeing his family. Ever since young Bakugo woke up, he'd been trying to move at least his finger. His goal was to just achieve a twitch. After hours without signs of success, the short-tempered boy went into a convulsion due to his pent-up rage. Since Katsuki wouldn't believe the doctors when they told him he'd be paralyzed for the rest of his life, the hospital staff hadn't requested his parents to give it a try. Katsuki's mother, Mitsuki Bakugo, shared her son's wild blonde hair. The woman had been sobbing with no end ever since Katsuki became hospitalized. "Whoever did this to my boy, I'll kill them. I'll kill the son of a dash." She began going on one of her occasional tantrums, but stopped upon hearing an aggravated groan from Katsuki. The father, Masaru Bakugo, seemed to stand out from the trio with brown hair and a short mustache. The man used his shirt to clean his foggy glasses, a result of his own tears. "What your mother is trying to say is that we're here for you. We love you," Masaru said. If Katsuki could move them, he'd be clenching his fists in anger. The boy became frustrated that he couldn't just storm off and end what he considered to be a stupid conversation. All Katsuki wanted to do was focus on trying to regain movement over his body, and his parents were bothering him. "I'll kill him myself when I get out of here. I'll be the hero that puts him down," Katsuki rasped out. It strained his throat to speak, but he wanted to make his intentions clear. Masaru turned his eyes away from Katsuki's gaze, unable to look his son in the face. Mitsuki found herself sobbing uncontrollably again, the woeful cries harder and louder. Neither of the parents had the heart to tell their son he would never be able to move again, let alone become a hero. "Soon you must realize you can't move, dash." Masaru tried to fight back tears as he attempted explaining the situation to his crippled child. "Shut up, old man," Katsuki shouted in defiance. The angry blonde boy had heard the same words from his doctors, and it only infuriated him. Katsuki refused to believe what they had to say. Mitsuki would have slapped her son over the head if not for his current condition. Instead, she shouted back, "Your father is trying to tell you something important. Listen to him," she fumed. Masaru cleared his throat and started again. "You can't become a hero, Katsuki. Your injuries are unfixable." "I'm sorry," the sorrowful father told his son. Katsuki wanted to lash out at them, desperately trying to move anything he could. His parents advanced towards him, preparing for a reassuring group hug. Katsuki gritted his teeth in anger that he couldn't avoid them. His intentions were to shake them off, but the only way he could do that was with another seizure. The parents cried for their boy, as doctors came rushing in to help make it pass like all the others. As Katsuki convulsed, he felt his anger slipping away and being drowned in tears. The boy couldn't fight back his own sobbing anymore, as he finally realized that his dream was over. Katsuki Bakugo was not only broken physically, but emotionally as well. Izuku Midoriya was overjoyed as he entered the all-too-familiar training facility that All for One would teach him in. The atmosphere was no longer lingering fear, but filled with a hopeful future in the boy's eyes. As Izuku waited for his instructor to arrive, he decided to spar with Nomus again. The creatures posed no issue for the green-haired boy, despite the personal challenges Izuku began creating for himself. Midoriya tried fighting with one arm behind his back or forced himself to stay in one place rather than dodge attacks. Nothing seemed too difficult, and it became boring for Izuku, so he decided to find a harder opponent than Nomus. Young Midoriya recalled a bedroom in which his old sparring partner resided in. The blue-haired boy named Tamura Shigaraki had locked himself inside. Izuku hesitated for only a moment, and then knocked on the door. Midoriya hoped for Tamura to answer, wishing the two could work side by side with one another. Izuku could only smile, as he thought about sharing his ideals with the other boy, and eventually his master. Nearly a minute passed with no response, so Izuku tried knocking again. "Tamura?" he shyly squeaked. Young Midoriya and young Shigaraki had never spent any time with one another outside of training, so Izuku wasn't quite sure how the blue-haired boy would react to him banging on his door. On the other side of the door, Tamura had plugged his ears with his fingers in annoyance. Young Shigaraki despised Izuku for many reasons, and refused to speak with him. Midoriya was like the superior brother in the family, casting a shadow over Tamura. All for One's praise only existed for Izuku, leaving Tamura to be scolded. Shigaraki upped his resentment, and combined it with the envy he had for Izuku's quirk. "Go away," Tamura shouted through the closed door. His muffled scream caught Midoriya off guard, making Izuku's smile vanish in an instant. The disdain from young Shigaraki reminded young Midoriya of Katsuki when he had started disregarding their friendship. Izuku fought the urge to say sorry for bothering the blue-haired boy, Tamura had always neglected him, and that made Midoriya become filled with frustration. The parallel to his relationship with Bakugo induced rage within Izuku, causing him to lash out on the door across from him. Being made of simple wood, it shattered like fragile glass. Midoriya's anger left his system, and was replaced with worry upon seeing what was on the other side. Though his back was to Izuku, and covered by a large chair connected to wires and cords, All for One was hooked into a major life support system designed to help him live without his mask. The injured man didn't bother turning around, he just weakly raised his hand to gesture for Midoriya to leave. Izuku gulped back his fear, not knowing if he had upset his teacher or if it were more of a concerned wave. The green-haired boy didn't bother to wait around and find out. He hastily walked away, as ordered. Izuku mulled over his options, trying to decide whether to wait for his master to come out, or if he should just head home. The choice was made for him when All for One approached Midoriya, now wearing the life support mask he was usually seen in. Izuku bowed, as soon as he saw his teacher. "My apologies, I didn't mean to dash." Midoriya started to explain himself, but All for One waved it off. "What was so urgent?" the masked man asked. His tone was hard to place, and it only doubled Izuku's anxiety. "When I was fighting the Nomus, I did a lot of thinking. What you said about Kaken, it made me realize that all the heroes are much like him. They're given praise for everything they do, and it blinds them from doing the right thing. I want to be the change needed to stop these people," Izuku replies. All for One nods in understanding, putting his hands in his pants pockets. The masked man had intended for Midoriya to be driven by a hatred for heroes, to want to wipe them out entirely. Tamura was deemed easier to persuade, but this child had proven to be quite stubborn. Upon hearing Izuku's new standpoint though, it put All for One at a relative ease. The masked man figured it was a start. He would work off of this ideology, and twist it into what he had originally intended. "I see that you share the same philosophy as the hero killer called Stain now," All for One says. Izuku Midoriya recalled hearing about the hero killer on the news. Stain had killed heroes in the counts of hundreds, and that was only the documented murders. "You should sympathize with him. He could teach you a few things in your new crusade," All for One suggested. The masked man thought of it as a way to get Midoriya to kill more heroes. Once Izuku had that much blood on his hands, the final steps would be easily taken. "I don't know about working with someone like Stain. Besides, my quirk should be more than enough. With my speed, nobody can touch me." Izuku discarded All for One's recommendation. In an instant, faster than even Izuku could move, All for One backhands Midoriya. The sudden attack startles the green-haired boy, leaving him frozen with fear, as he rubs the certain bruise growing on his cheek. All for One would grimace at the boy if he had a face. Izuku was lucky that the masked man hadn't used his full force in the slap. "Was it not so long ago that you were quirkless? When did you become dependent on the power I gave you? Never rely on your quirk. Never become overconfident, you stupid cocky child." All for One scolds Izuku like a disappointed parent. The masked man crouches down so he can be at Izuku's level. "When I offer you something, it's to benefit you. So please take it," All for One says whilst putting out a hand for the green-haired boy to take. Izuku flinches at the extended arm, afraid he'll be hit a second time. With his quirk, every movement outside of his own appeared to be in slow motion. The surprise blow from All for One had happened in an instant, although Midoriya were quirkless yet again. The boy hesitates before taking his master's hand so he can be helped back up to his feet. The confidence Izuku had gained when slaughtering the Nomus quickly vanished. Midoriya had believed himself to be all-powerful and unbeatable. Izuku begins to think about the repercussions if he were to ever not be capable of defeating an opponent. This makes the green-haired boy focus on the recurring thought refusing to leave his mind, the one that reminds him he was once quirkless. After hearing all this commotion, Tamura Shigaraki finally unlocks his door and exits the room. "What happened?" the blue-haired boy asks. Tamura inspects the scene and quickly deduces Izuku had gotten reprimanded. Young Shigaraki can't help but smirk at the thought of Midoriya being put down by their master. "I was just teaching Izuku a valuable lesson. Never become too dependent on your quirk. It could be the death of you. After all, there's a pro hero capable of erasing your quirk, rendering you helpless in a fight if that were the case." All for One briefly gives Tamura a recap of what had transpired. Izuku stops rubbing his cheek and begins massaging his chin in thought. The pro hero that All for One mentioned was named Eraserhead. The hero wasn't too popular due to his disinterest in speaking with the media. Like Midoriya's mindset, Eraserhead didn't care about the public's praise and only wanted to help people the best that he could. "That's a very good lesson to learn. Perhaps I should teach it to others," Izuku replies. All for One cocked his head in confusion. "What are you saying, Izuku?" the masked man asks. "Eraserhead can nullify a person's quirk just by staring at them. If I can convince him to work alongside us, he would be able to train Tamura and I." Izuku shares his plan with All for One. The green-haired boy figured it would be the best of both worlds, someone to teach them how to fight without their quirks, and be a member of the team capable of nullifying those who weren't savvy in that field of combat. Izuku was completely unaware of All for One's true nature to understand why such an idea could never truly flourish. All for One shook his head, knowing full well that Shota Aizawa would never join his legion. It took only a moment to think of an excuse to deter the boy. You truly believe he would fall in line with our point of view? After all, he's a teacher at U.A, the school that presents these false heroes to begin with. The masked man feels proud of himself for coming up with a perfect deflection. Izuku looks down at the floor, mildly discouraged. You might have a point. What a shame, he could have been a great help, Midoriya replies. All for One grinned behind his mask. At this rate, the boy would soon be just like him. Izuku Midoriya had a brilliant mind, one that sparked a new idea of how Eraserhead would be both of use and be taken out of the equation. Yes, or more specifically his eyes. If we can get a hold of those and transplant them, his quirk will go unwasted, All for One suggests. Izuku's jaw almost hits the floor with shock. You want me to gouge out his eyes? The green-haired boy gasps with horror. Young Shigaraki sees Izuku's hesitation as a chance to steal the spotlight and gain All for One's pride. If you're incapable of doing the deed, I'll be happy to, Tamura intervenes. The blue-haired boy's smirk is cheek to cheek upon belief that he bested Midoriya. It's for the greater good. What if you come across an opponent who has a quirk more powerful than your own? All for One begins molding the idea into Midoriya's mind. Tamura constrains himself from throwing a tantrum upon being ignored. Young Shigaraki scratches at his neck in annoyance, like the frustration is eating away at his skin. Eraserhead isn't like the others. He doesn't care for the media. He actually wants to help people, Izuku argues. He refuses to kill anyone that doesn't deserve it. That's where the line is drawn between staying a hero and becoming a villain. All for One restrains himself from backhanding the boy a second time, his anger getting the best of him. Izuku was looking over the ledge right about now, gazing into his perfect abyss. The metaphor was perfect. All the masked man had to do was push Midoriya into the darkness. All for One believed the only way to bring about a transition from being like the hero killer to an actual hero killer was by having Izuku murder Eraserhead. I thought you should stop being so foolish. Shota Aizawa is just like all the others. He just can't hide his true self as easily, so he avoids the media. All for One warps the reasoning to his own benefit. The masked man can tell that he's making Izuku second guess himself. Young Midoriya begins to realize how bad it hurts when reality hits. The green-haired boy had killed and battered the endless Nomus, and was even believed to have murdered his longtime rival. However, the thought of killing another human being was sickening to him. Izuku thought it'd be easy after Katsuki, but thinking about murdering another person felt too surreal to him. Izuku shakes off the feeling and decides he'll worry about it later. For now, he'll focus on following his master's orders. In Midoriya's mind, All for One had been right about everything all along and supported Izuku the whole time no matter what his decision. It was time the green-haired boy repay his master. Aizawa, I was told he would teach my class if I went to the UA. I can get in close to him that way. Izuku begins to reason. All for One was torn down in the middle of his emotions. On one hand, he felt pride that Izuku was willing to go through with stealing Eraserhead's eyes, while at the same time, All for One worried the boy was still too good-hearted, and that being around other people of that manner would cause him to waver. Unwilling to take that risk, and allow for Izuku to falter, the masked man shakes his head. It's too risky. You'd be under close surveillance, and have little to no time after school to train with me, All for One says, as his excuse. Tamura sees the moment of uncertainty as another chance to chime in. Perhaps we could use the remaining Nomus to bring about an invasion on the school grounds. We could use the raid as a distraction, and take care of Aizawa then, Shigaraki suggests. Before anyone else can say anything, Izuku turns down Tamura's offer. That's far riskier. It would draw too much attention. That's something a theatrical villain would do to be flashy. There's already too many heroes there, and the Nomus would only bring more running. Midoriya breaks down why the plan wouldn't work. All for One crosses his arms, as he begins to realize Izuku's plan is the only one that would work. I agree with you, Izuku. Your plan is far more strategic. The masked man decides to take a leap of faith. Tamura shakes with anger like a volcano about to erupt. Young Shigaraki clenches and opens his hand as he tries to withdraw himself from attacking Midoriya. The blue-haired boy wants to corrupt Izuku with his quirk and shout how much he hates the green-haired child, but runs the other direction instead. Tamura, wait! Izuku calls after the blue-haired kid. To no avail, Shigaraki continues running. I'll go talk to him for now. Continue, as planned, and start your first day at U.A. All for One says before going in the same direction that Tamura ran off in. Once Izuku was gone, the masked man detoured and went to speak with someone other than Tamura. A cloaked figure with a hood covering his face waited in the room where All for One's life support machine was set up. The cloak was as dark as the room's lighting, making it difficult to see the man. You wanted to speak with me, master? the cloaked figure asked, as he knelt down on one knee. Yes, I'm providing you with the task of following Izuku Midoriya to the UA. Keep your eye on the boy, and make sure he doesn't begin to falter. He's by far the best candidate to become my protege. All for one, orders the hooded man. Yes, my liege, the cloaked figure responds whilst heading in the direction that young Midoriya went. Don't disappoint me with failure, All for one threatens, as he hooks himself into the life support system. Izuku Midoriya began slowing his running speed so it would lead into a smooth slide for a safe stop. His surprise to find several students, and Shota Aizawa outside was as vast as the ocean, to say the least. The green-haired boy exchanged a stare with the teacher, both of them seemingly taking one another in. Izuku's heart thumped like a drum, not only from running non-stop, but due to the anxiety of looking the person he planned to murder in the eyes. Aizawa appeared to be gazing into his soul, a scowl forming across his face. Young Midoriya tried gulping back his worry, wondering why he had earned such a stare. The thought crossed Izuku's mind. What if he somehow knows what I'm planning? You're late, Shota said with a bored expression that somehow mixed with disappointment. Izuku let out a breath he had been holding ever since the staring contest started. Young Midoriya was relieved, to say the least, glad that the teacher accepted him back into Udata so easily, and that was all he would be considered problematic for. If you don't consider tardiness an issue, then you won't mind performing the Quirk apprehension test alone whilst holding up your classmates. Aizawa scolded the boy while crossing his arms. Izuku glanced between the teacher and the other students, now completely flushed red with embarrassment. Oh, I didn't mean to dash. Izuku started apologizing, but never got to finish. This test will determine whether or not you're fit to be a hero. Let this be a fair warning. Whichever student ranks last in total points will be deemed hopeless and immediately expelled. Shota interrupts. Izuku's jaw almost hit the floor. All of this was so sudden. The green-haired boy shook it off and prepared to do his best on whatever trial thrown his way. All for one had told the boy not to rely on his quirk, but Midoriya decided he'd make an exception just this once. Fine. If you want to underestimate me, that's your problem, Izuku confidently said back. Both Aizawa and Midoriya were shocked by the sudden retort. Izuku thought about Katsuki and how arrogant he had become when his quirk blossomed. The green-haired boy began to understand why All for One had told him not to rely on his quirk too much, for it would cause the person to become brash. Shota found himself smiling, eager to see just what the green-haired boy could do. Aizawa tossed a baseball into Midoriya's hands and pointed into the sky. This is meant to be the last test, a pitch to determine just how in control of your quirk you really are. Throw the ball a proper distance and prove me wrong, the teacher explains. Izuku nods in understanding and begins to wind up for a powerful pitch. Midoriya watches as everything around him slows and comes closer to a full stop. The throw will be accumulated due to how fast his arm moves, providing the proper velocity needed. Just as Izuku prepares to release the ball from his grip and send it rocketing, he notices a change in his environment from the corner of his eye. The iris of Aizawa's eyes were slowly bursting, allowing for a dark red shade to flood in. At first, Midoriya worried Shota had suffered some sort of internal bleeding, but it took only a second to realize that this was his Erasure quirk. The effects slowly started setting in, as the sockets came closer and closer to filling with the red shade. Midoriya spotted a bird in the sky that started moving its wings again, despite them going in slow motion. Izuku gritted his teeth in anger as he realized Shota was erasing his quirk. The teacher had planned to humiliate him, and further proved All for One's warning to not rely on your quirk to be of utmost importance. Izuku realized he still had a few more seconds of super speed, thinking about how he would use the slow motion extended time to his advantage. Midoriya discarded the idea to continue pitching the ball, coming to the conclusion that despite his remaining speed, it wouldn't go very far. Izuku glanced back at the teacher and his eyes, giving the green-haired boy an idea. Izuku gave it his all to sprint head-on at his teacher, cupping his hand and extending his arm to reach the man's face. Just as Aizawa's quirk fully erased Midoriya's, the green-haired boy had already achieved his goal and covered the teacher's eyes with his hand. Shota and the students were in awe upon witnessing the phenomenal speeds. Midoriya had moved so fast that even Shota was confused by what had just happened. Teleportation? He questioned. No, Izuku replied. The green-haired boy decided it was in his best interest to not share what his quirk was, as long as the others were uncertain. Don't ever try erasing my quirk again, Izuku warned Shota. Hopefully I won't need to because you passed, Aizawa said, as Midoriya moved his hand away. The students began applauding and cheering for Izuku, making it difficult for the boy to avoid making a goofy smile. The group of classmates began approaching him to glorify Midoriya, but their teacher used his controlled clothes to intervene. That's enough. We've still got a long day ahead of us. Follow me, and we'll return to class, Aizawa told his students before leading them back inside. As he walked, Izuku got to basically meet every member of his class. One of them he recognized from the entrance exam, the boy with the glasses. I would like to apologize. I misjudged you. I see great potential in you now. The well-mannered student became stumped, as he realized he hadn't gotten a name. Izuku, Achiko Uraraka answered for everyone wondering, as she ran over to congratulate Midoriya as well. The green-haired boy did his best to cover up his blush. Oh hey Achiko, you saw that huh? Izuku awkwardly chuckled. Yeah man, we all did. You were amazing. A blonde-haired student shouted over the others giving praise. My name's Denki Kaminari, and I can tell we're gonna be a great team. The excited boy beamed. I am Tenya Ida, the boy with the glasses greeted while bowing. It's nice to meet you all. Izuku wasn't used to praise, let alone from a crowd. The whole thing felt like paparazzi flooding him, and it gave the boy no breathing room. A smaller student with strange purple hair hopped up and down to make himself seen. Hey, don't forget about me, he called out. I'm Minoru Mineta. We're gonna be the best of friends, the purple-haired boy confidently stated. The other students seemed to share the same idea as Minoru, as they all nodded and murmured agreements. The only one who seemed distant and unimpressed was the boy Izuku noticed back during the entrance exam. Half of him was encased in ice, the other half had white hair, and seemed annoyed. Before Izuku could ask about the unenthusiastic one or any of the other students could introduce themselves, the group reached their classroom. Everyone seemed to wait outside in the hallway. As Izuku entered, Midoriya took notice and turned around in confusion. The other students motioned and nodded to him in encouragement. Midoriya shrugged it off in confusion and took a seat up front so he could pay close attention during lectures. That's when all the other students came crashing through the door frame like a stampede, each one scrambling for a seat next to Izuku and explaining why they had been waiting for him to enter first. A student with pointy red hair powered through the lot and plopped down in one of the seats beside Izuku. Heya, I'm Eijiro Kurishima, the redhead greeted me. The other seat was filled with a familiar face, Ochako Uraraka. Hi Izuku, she beamed. The other students sulked in defeat, aside from 3 who had already taken their seats and shared the ice boy's disinterest. An older girl with black hair tied into a spiky ponytail and bangs on the right side of her face, a boy who had a black bird-shaped head, and another girl with plug-like earlobes sat in the back. Hey, I'm Hanta Siro, a boy whispered from behind Izuku as he sat down. Hanta had very large teeth that dominated his grin, along with black hair that had spiked ends. Before Midoriya could reply, Shota Aizawa cleared his throat for the class to pay attention. If you're all finished, I gathered you here again to receive your costumes. The teacher yawned like he had gotten no sleep the previous night. The class began murmuring with one another in continued excitement, as lockers dispensed from the wall. All except Izuku ran to retrieve their costumes, leaving Midoriya perplexed. The green-haired boy never submitted his costume design, and would now be the odd one out yet again. Why aren't you putting on your uniform like the others? Aizawa asked. I never gave you a drawing to work off of, Izuku replied in distress. Shota cocked one of his eyebrows. But your mother did, he said before forming a small smile. Upon seeing Izuku's sorrow wash away with shared excitement from his classmates, Aizawa had to hide his ever-growing grin. Now go suit up, Shota said whilst turning away from the boy to hide his happy expression. Izuku cheerfully ran over to his locker, eager to see what his costume looked like. The boy pulls out a green fabric and becomes giddy, racing to the changing rooms to see what it looks like on him. The enthusiasm is soon vanquished as he pulls out the mask piece, the bottom half looking like a sinister snarl. Izuku's happy memories were immediately replaced with the one in which Katsuki had burned his notebook. Midoriya clutched the mask, as he remembered redrawing the smile into a frown. The cloaked figure that all for one sent to watch the boy was originally planning to intervene after seeing how happy Izuku was, but the hooded man held back upon seeing this new facial expression. Izuku remembered why he was really at U.A, the mission becoming clear again. Midoriya put on the mask and accepted his new look. He would be the opposite of All Might. The other students didn't share this acceptance, becoming freaked out by the sinister-looking mask. Midoriya didn't pay them any mind, as he joined the suited-up heroes in another room. The only student who dared say anything was Achiko, who was shocked to see such a suit design considering how kind Izuku had always been. Izuku, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what's with the mask? Achiko timidly asked. Luckily, the mask hid Izuku's pained expression for scaring the girl he had come to like. Before Midoriya could explain what happened to his drawing, another classmate interjected. I think it looks cool, a green-haired girl said cheerfully. She added a playful ribbit to go along with her frog costume design. A floating pair of light blue gloves and white sneakers strolled over to Izuku. Me too, super cute. The voice belonged to that of a girl. I think it's awesome, the girl with the earphone jacks said bashfully. She tried hiding a blush with the jacks. Chaco's blood boiled, as another girl with pink skin wearing a skin-tight purple and turquoise camouflage bodysuit shared the same praise. I thought it was cool too. I was just joking, she shouted over the other girls whilst waving her arms, as if she were trying to shoo away dogs. Izuku was relieved for his mask now Not only had it gained attention from nearly every female in his class, but it covered the tomato-red face he now had. All the commotion had distracted him from taking notice of Uraraka's costume, the girl standing next to him the whole time. Izuku nearly jumped back, his prepubescent feelings washing over him like powerful waves. Chaco's costume was skin-tight. The colors were a mix of pink and black, detached sleeves assorted at several acupuncture points. "Oh, Chaco, what about your suit?" Izuku shouted. Chaco's face flushed red, with no mask to hide it. "Oh, this? I didn't mean for it to be so tight. I guess I wasn't specific enough with my design request," she complained. "I think it looks perfect," the purple-haired boy named Minoru Mineta interjected with 2 thumbs up. Before the class can share any more thoughts on one another's costumes, they get interrupted by the arrival of Shota Aizawa. "That's enough, everyone. It's time to begin the battle trials." The statement from their teacher gathers everyone's attention. The rules are simple. You will all be separated into groups of 2, heroes versus villains style. The battles will be held indoors with the villains guarding a fake nuclear weapon, and the heroes must stop their scheme. If the heroes capture the villains or reach the nuke before the time runs out, they win. If the villains manage to keep the nuclear core guarded until the timer ends or capture the heroes, then they win, Aizawa explains. During each battle simulation, the rest of you will watch from the cameras in the surveillance room. Now, I'll be hand-selecting teams to combat one another, Shota says. Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka. You 2 will be the villains, Aizawa states. The class murmurs and gasps among each other after hearing Shota's decision. Izuku winces at the word villains, but Uraraka doesn't seem to care, as she claps lightly with joy. "Hear that, Izuku? What are the chances you and I got put on the same team?" she says happily. "Why, yeah," Izuku replies as he listens to Aizawa's choice for their opponents. Tenya Ida and Shoto Todoroki. You 2 will be the heroes. Aizawa chose the boy with the glasses and the boy half encased in ice to be Izuku's enemies. The teams disperse quickly, the scene now set. Class 1A watches from the monitors, as Izuku and Ochako guard the fake nuke. Outside the makeshift battle site are Tenya and Shoto. The 2 separate teams give a moment to strategize. Shoto Todoroki uses his half-cold quirk to lower the temperature inside the villain base. Ice begins formulating along the walls and across the floor, as the building slowly freezes over. The hero team decided the best way to win was to freeze the villain team out. Inside, Izuku and Ochako shiver due to the temperature drop. As snow begins flurrying and ice spreads, the 2 quickly deduce it's the work of Shoto. He's going to try and encase us in ice. It'll be an easy win for them if we don't come up with something quick, Izuku says to Ochako. "Leave it to me," Uraraka shouts back, as she uses her zero-gravity quirk to make her and Izuku float. The 2 levitate just in time to avoid ice protruding to grab at where their legs had been. "Good call, Ochako." Izuku compliments his partner for her quick thinking, and begins doing some of his own. Midoriya mutters out loud to himself, as he mulls over different techniques, and plans on how to counter Shoto's attack. "I've got an idea. Release me, and I'll clear away the ice," Izuku orders his teammate. Ochako nods in compliance, and allows for Midoriya's gravity to return. Izuku immediately begins rubbing his hands together at a fast pace, creating the right amount of friction to melt the ice beneath him. Not stopping, the green-haired boy takes this improvised heat and runs throughout the building with it going at a continued rate. Once the ice melts away, Izuku returns to Ochiko's side. Uraraka runs to her partner's aid. The rush had left Izuku exhausted. Midoriya breathed heavily as he tried to recuperate. "Are you going to be okay?" Ochako asked. Izuku nodded. "Yeah, I just need a moment," the green-haired boy reassures his teammate. From the surveillance room, Class 1A surprisingly finds itself cheering for the villain team. Shota Aizawa normally fell asleep in his sleeping bag during these events, but the commotion had gotten his attention, and he was now wide awake spectating the match as well. Alongside him was Recovery Girl in case anybody got injured during the battle trials. Outside the villain base, Shoto and Tenya shared a confused look. "Our plan didn't work," Tenya stated the obvious. "Looks like we're going to have to move in," Shoto replies before entering the makeshift building. "We can't just rush them head-on. We need a plan B," Tenya complained whilst trying to stop his partner from going any further. "You're the plan B. You may be the only one fast enough to match Izuku's speed. Keep him occupied long enough for me to reach the nuke," Todoroki replies. Meanwhile, young Midoriya had finally gotten his energy back, and began preparing a countermeasure of his own. "I know what Shoto's quirk is, but I wasn't here for Tenya's demonstration." "Ochako, what can Tenya do?" Izuku asked. It's kinda like you. He can be pretty fast," Uraraka tried to explain the quirk to her partner. Izuku gritted his teeth, annoyed that someone may have a quirk similar to power. All for one's warning about relying on his quirk came full circle yet again. "Okay, then it's only reasonable that they'll try pitting him against me while Shoto tries to get back past you. What we're going to do is the opposite. I'm staying here, and you're going down there to occupy Tenya." Izuku shared his new plan. "But what if Shoto gets in the way?" Achiko worried. He won't, Izuku promised. I'll run in, as fast as I can, and take him with me so he doesn't pose a problem to you, Midoriya said. Okay, sounds like a plan, Achiko replied reluctantly. Like Izuku had planned, the hero team didn't expect the sudden attack. Achiko uses her quirk to take away Tenya's gravity, leaving the opponent's quirk ineffective since he can't touch the ground. While Shoto is distracted by his levitating partner, Izuku uses the opportunity to grab Todoroki and pull him away from the battle. With his partner taken by one of the villain team members, Tenya begins panicking. He watches as Uraraka picks up a stray metal pipe and prepares to whack him with it. Sorry, she apologizes just before she takes a swing at Tenya. Tenya reacts immediately, using his Enju quirk to activate thrusters that protrude from the back of his calves. Reciprocal bursts, Tenya cries out as he's accelerated through the air and dodges the swing of the metal pipe. The enhanced speed, thanks to his calf engines, allows Tenya to touch down on the wall and run alongside it to reach Achiko. Before Tenya can reach her, Uraraka releases her quirk on the fast opponent, which causes Tenya to fall flat on his back upon return of gravity. With her enemy down, Achiko uses the time to flee and hide. Meanwhile, Izuku dragged Todoroki to a different floor to get a proper distance from their partners. In an effort to escape his enemy's grip, Shoto creates ice shards from his fingertips and slashes at Midoriya's hand. Izuku releases his hold on Shoto upon getting his hand sliced, and the two come to a full force stop, causing them both to crash into a nearby wall. Izuku holds his wounded hand as he tries to get back up from the debris the impact created. Shoto doesn't bother getting to his feet, being on his hands and knees allows him to send ice spreading across the floor from them. Young Midoriya sees the oncoming terrain and runs the other way to avoid getting caught by it. Realizing that evading the slick surface would just eventually lead him back to their partners, Izuku avoids going through the doorway in which he came. Instead, Midoriya uses the momentum from his speed to run up the wall in front of him, and then along the ceiling back in the direction of Todoroki. Shoto is taken completely by surprise, as Izuku manages to evade the attack, and returns with a punch that shatters the ice covering Shoto's body. The hit sends Todoroki flying across the room, the boy coughing up blood due to how strong the impact was. Despite Izuku trying to hold back, the hit could have shattered Shoto's skull had it not been for the ice covering. What shocks Izuku, and the entirety of Class 1A watching from the surveillance room, is what was underneath the ice casing. The other half of Shoto Todoroki's body has red hair, and a burned scar over his left eye. The boy acts humiliated after getting the other side exposed. His newly revealed half smokes, the steam a clear indicator that aside from his ice power, he has control over heat as well. The rising temperature melts the ice surface beneath them. A few floors beneath Izuku and Shoto were Tenya and Achiko. Uraraka had been using the winding halls as a maze to evade Ida. The time spent chasing Achiko allowed for Tenya's engines to refuel, and his quirk to become fully functional again. As Uraraka rounded another corner, she was shocked to find that it was a dead end. It was only a matter of time before Tenya caught up to her and reached the dead end as well. What shocked Ida was that Achiko was no longer there. At least, that's what he thought. Achiko had used her quirk to take away her own gravity and weight pressed against the roof. By the time Tenya tried looking up, it was too late. Uraraka returned her gravity and dropped down on Ida. However, the surprise attack wasn't enough, as Tenya overpowered her and used handcuffs provided by U.A to capture the villain team member. With Uraraka subdued, all that was left was Izuku. Achiko used the comm link given to each team to warn her partner. Izuku, Tenya detained me, she cried over the wavelength. Midoriya cursed under his breath, the odds now stacked against him. The green-haired boy began mulling over new plans on how to best both enemies and save Ochako. The only thing that Izuku thought of was risky, but he had to try it. Izuku placed his hands on the floor and began rapidly shaking them at a constantly growing speed. The move caused the ground to vibrate and threw Todoroki off balance, as if it were an earthquake. Eventually, the continuous pressure Izuku exerted into the floor caused it to crack and break. As soon as that crumbled, the rubble crashed through the next floor, and the next. Eventually, the collapsing floors reached Ochako, and Tenya, who leapt out of the way of oncoming debris. With a self-created detour, Izuku jumped down the hole and landed in between Ida and Uraraka. Try taking me on, Izuku challenged Tenya. Ida accepted his opponent's provocation and activated the engines in his calves. Using the boost, Tenya tried kicking Izuku. Midoriya's worry soon evaporated, as he realized the attack was still slow for him. Achiko was wrong. Tenya's quirk was nowhere near the level that Izuku's was. Young Midoriya easily caught the leg and used the momentum to toss Ida through another wall. Everyone was on the edge of their seat watching, as Izuku bested Tenya in combat within a matter of seconds. From the floors above the confrontation, Todoroki watched, as well, and cursed under his breath. Shoto decided it would be best if he just tried to make it to the nuke rather than fight Izuku. Todoroki covered the holes with immense ice sheeting so it would be difficult for his enemies to reach him. While that would buy him a little time, Shoto used every second of it to run for the nuke. Meanwhile, Izuku tended to Achiko and freed her from the handcuffs. "What are you doing, Izuku? Go after Shoto," Uraraka cried out in confusion. "Saving people is more important, especially when it's you." Izuku didn't pay any mind to his response since it was what he had always believed in. The second half of the statement completely went over his head, while Uraraka blushed profusely upon hearing it. Achiko wasn't the only one who had taken the statement to heart. The cloaked figure assigned by All for One to watch Izuku heard it too, and decided that this was his time to act. The hooded man emerged from his hiding spot, and presented himself for the villain team to see. "Who would have thought this school would cause you to waver?" the cloaked being said more than asked, as he approached the kids. Izuku instantly knew the mysterious man was addressing him, but Achiko was both scared and confused, as she hid behind Midoriya. "What do you want? Who sent you?" Izuku asked despite feeling like he knew the answer. All for One had been wary of allowing him to go to the UA. The arrival of this man made Midoriya feel although his master had no trust in him. "Those questions will be answered when I bring you back," the hooded man replies. Izuku clenched his fists, preparing for another battle. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Midoriya's response sounded more like a threat than a statement. Meanwhile, Class 1A was being evacuated by Recovery Girl after witnessing the mystery man's arrival. Shota Aizawa hurried to the battle site so he could intervene and save his students. "Very well," the man replied before removing his cloak. What was underneath looked like Frankenstein's monster, a stitched-together redhead adult. The being was, as Izuku described to the detective who visited his house, very muscular, and looked to be quite an opposing threat. Midoriya wondered if this was some kind of advanced Noma. Izuku had no time to think about it, as the man rushed him head-on, leading the green-suited boy to dodge the oncoming attack. Dust particles shot up from the ground, as the man's fist connected with the floor. It was then that Izuku's heart skipped a beat. He realized that he may have moved, but Uraraka was still there. "No," he called out, as he ran to her rescue. Izuku wasn't fast enough, as the man grabbed hold of her wrist and began using his quirk, Age. Midoriya watched in horror, as Uraraka rapidly went from being a child to a teenager, and then slowly became an adult. Due to his hesitant shock, Izuku managed to get grabbed, as well, leading him to be affected by the enemy's quirk. "He won't be happy that I killed you, but he'll get over it," the man said through a sinister smile. Izuku was sure that this was how he would die. He would rapidly lose his youth alongside a girl he wished he could have grown old slowly with instead. Just as the boy turned adult began to give up, Shota Aizawa finally arrived. Eraserhead now wore specifically modified goggles to hide his eyes when using his quirk to erase the enemy's quirk. Aizawa's lengthy hair was lifted up, as he stared the opponent down, the cloth strips he would normally use to bind enemies being used to pull his students away from harm. The villain takes notice of Eraserhead's arrival, and launches a new attack. Aizawa swiftly ducks under the punch, and sweeps his enemy's legs out from under him. With the opponent downed, Shota quickly restrains the villain with his cloth coils. After watching Eraserhead promptly defeat an enemy that he couldn't, Izuku begins questioning whether or not his mission is still possible. Midoriya comes to terms that he wouldn't be able to do it alone, and begins thinking about All for One's suggestion of the hero killer named Stain. Many people believe Stain to be quirkless, and merely just skilled when it comes to combat with blades. If this were true, someone like Aizawa who just erases quirks would have a hard time defeating such an opponent. Izuku pushes the thought out of his mind for the time being, his loyalty now in question after being attacked by someone he believed was sent by All for One. Izuku stands up with Achiko, now shocked to see the girl turned into a woman. The already tight suit she wore was now tightened due to her growth, and Izuku had to turn away to hide his manhood. Meanwhile, Aizawa began interrogating the man who had attacked them. "Reverse the effects of your quirk," Shota commanded the enemy, who just simply laughed back in his captive's face. "Even if I wanted to, I can't," the red-haired man said in between his hysterical laughter. Aizawa gritted his teeth in anger. "You'll pay for this, you delusional dash." Shota had to bite his tongue from saying anything else. "Who sent you?" Eraserhead decided to take the interrogation in a different route. Izuku and the red-haired man shared a knowing glance. Midoriya became worried that he would share the details about Katsuki, and more. Time stood still around Izuku, as he began using his quirk to move at a speed in which nobody would know he ever moved. Midoriya didn't bother holding back tears, as he knelt down behind the man who had attacked him, and prepared to perform another murder. To keep his secret well kept, Izuku snapped the man's neck, killing the redhead instantly. When the deed was done, Midoriya returned to the place he had been standing originally, and pretended the crying was because of his age being altered. Considering Achiko was already crying about it, this seemed to be a good cover-up. Izuku removed his mask, and wiped away the tears, starting to see the truth in what All for One had told him. This kill was far easier than Katsuki, but the amount of guilt Izuku felt still ate away at him. Despite this man trying to kill him first, it felt wrong. Aizawa was shocked to suddenly be holding a corpse. The man's head jerked in an instant movement, and just as fast as he was alive, the redhead became dead. Shota's hair dropped before he removed his goggles and turned around to face his 2 students. The teacher had no words for them. Everyone was then dismissed and sent home early if they weren't being treated or questioned about the occurrence. After Izuku did his ordeal, he went straight to All for One's dwelling. "All for One, show yourself," Izuku shouted in anger. The boy-turned-adult was taken by surprise when All for One spoke from behind him. "How you've grown, Izuku," the masked man jokes. Midoriya clenched his fist in anger. "You sent that guy to do this to me, didn't you?" Izuku accuses the masked man. "I swear to you when I say I have no idea what you're talking about. Calm down, and come sit with me. Tell me what happened." All for One half lied. The masked man didn't know what had happened with the person he sent to watch over Izuku, but he was responsible for it. "Some guy attacked me at U.A and almost took my entire youth away." Izuku didn't know where to start with his explanation, but managed to say what came to mind first. "And why would you believe me to have sent such a person? You're my disciple. Why would I want you dead?" The masked man was unaware of his colleague's betrayal. Midoriya began to calm down and apologized with a bow. "You're right, I'm sorry I accused you. It was just something he said," Izuku replied. "I understand. Who would want you dead though? Who would dare attack U.A?" All for One pretended to be baffled and led Izuku astray. Midoriya instantly begins looking around the room after hearing the mention of an attack on UA. "Where's Tamura?" Izuku asked. All for One begins seeing where this new accusation is coming from, and decides that sacrificing Shigaraki is necessary in preparing Izuku to become his successor. "I don't know if I never found him after he ran off." "You don't think he was the one who sent that assassin, do you?" The masked man played with Izuku's thoughts yet again. "He did say he wanted to attack the U.S with Nomus after I told him why his plan wouldn't work. Maybe he became spiteful," Izuku wondered. Meanwhile, Tamura Shigaraki walked out onto the catwalk that overlooked numerous tanks filled with Nomus. Tamura planned to release the Nomus and prove he was superior to Izuku, no matter what it took. "We need to check on the Nomus to see if he took them," Izuku said, as he ran towards the containment room. By the time he and All for One arrived, all they saw from the catwalk was empty water tanks. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.